let's say there's a group of people, everybody there is peaceful. Maybe it's a little contentious, but nobody is engaging in any kind of violence. And then 2 or 3 people in the crowd literally throw like a bottle and bricks and stuff like that. Would you say that that violence is bad? And the police haven't done any violence yet. They're literally just like forming a line.
If they haven't done anything,
I
would say that that's very stupid. I would say that that's a dumb thing.
Is it bad? Okay, but is it bad violence? Would you say that that's not a good use of violence?
I think that it's not productive necessarily. I don't think that that would be productive in that.
I don't know how we got her, Hutch.
That's not really. I think it's dumb, but I don't think it's bad. I wouldn't do it.
I failed to see the distinction. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Why is it dumb? I would say it's counterproductive. Do you disagree?
It depends. I think it can be.
Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Today, we are going to be talking about protests versus rioting. What makes the difference? Is it ever okay to use violence or do vandalism or loot at a protest? If there is a protest for a just cause, is it okay to criticize those who might get out of hand? Would that not take away from the cause itself? We're going to talk about all that today. We got some great guests. I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves, tell you who they are, and what their opening thoughts are on this. We're going to start with Staxiums. Staxiums, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, how's it going? Okay, still writing some thoughts. So I was at the No Kings protest yesterday. So I want to say a couple things because my conservative family member went ahead and messaged me basically saying you got to be worried because, you saw what the LA riots were like, or not the LA riots, the LA protest, right? But he called it the LA riots, right? And I there were a few things that I told him. The first is that these protests were 99.999% nonviolent. 2, all casualties, as far as I'm aware, were sustained by protesters, not from protesters. 3, any group this large will attract bad actors. And 4, these groups of protesters are behaving remarkably better than I would expect from a group that is under threat of being violently deported without due process. I would refuse to condemn the violence to conservatives. But today, I'm not talking to conservatives. I am talking to leftists who are encouraging this violence. And I would say optics matter, and ensuring that we can get the maximum number of participants through playing to moderates is the best way we can do anything. And it's the number one reason why the civil rights movement was so successful.
Okay, I wouldn't condemn it, conservatives. That's a bold stance. We'll see how it goes for you. We're going to give it to Charlie. Charlie, what are your thoughts here?
Hello, I am Charlie, also known as Enemy Charlie. I am a streamer. I specialize in fantasy literature, not politics, but I like to run my mouth, so here we are. I had a whole big, long statement planned out, but I don't have the time for that, so let me summarize it as much as possible. My stance is that instances of violence, looting, and vandalism on the part of the protesters in Los Angeles are understandable because residents of Los Angeles are living in fear of having their lives, families, and communities torn apart by ICE. Furthermore, I believe that it is the responsibility of local and state politicians to prevent violence by listening to the people they ostensibly serve and not allowing them to live under conditions in which they feel like violence, looting, and vandalism are their only recourse. I would also agree with Staxiums and say that, my God, I was doing research on the 1992 LA riots, and what we're seeing in LA now is not violent. In 1992, crowds of people were pulling random civilians from their cars and beating them to death. This is child's play. This is lone actors throwing bricks at police cars, burning of Waymos, and some corporate store looting. I don't really... Again, the scope of the violence is not extreme, especially considering the scope of the violence that the protesters are facing from LAPD. I think we've all seen the videos of for instance, the Australian news reporter who had a cop line up a less lethal round at her, totally clear, and just shoot it at her while she was reporting. So again, this shit is crazy. But basically, oh my God, I'll just finish it. In essence, I feel that preventing violence falls upon the shoulders of local and state politicians. People resort to violence, vandalism, and looting when they feel desperate and without any other choice, and things only get worse when the state's response to peaceful protests is to send the LAPD out to brutalize protesters.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you for being here. We'll get into it as we go. Appreciate you for being here. We're going to give it to Hutch. Please, what do you have, sir?
What's up, guys? Nice to meet you. I want to echo part of what Charlie said because I feel like she was trying to get at the importance of contextualizing violence as they manifest in these kinds of protest movements. And I think that that's really important. You have to do that. I also want to perfectly echo what Staxium said. I had basically the same exact conversation with a relative and spoke to them a couple days ago. And one of the first questions they asked me is, are you staying out of LA? Like the boomer generation that spends 12 hours looking at their phones on Facebook all day, they firmly believe that in these major metropolitan areas all over the country, it's just pure anarchy, Mad Max level of dystopia. But I do want to focus the crux of the arguments that I'm going to make during this conversation on just practical considerations. I do want to see a successful opposition movement spring up and inhibit Donald Trump politically. I do want to see this movement lead to sustained wins in special elections and the midterm elections. And to that end, I think the movement needs to be explicitly rooted in nonviolence. I don't know how much time we should spend condemning violence, but I do think that there needs to be a definitional sort of establishment of what this movement is, and it has to be seen as nonviolent if we want the movement to be successful. And we can get into more of it during the conversation, but yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for being here, and we will talk about it as we go. Next up, Rudy. Please, what do you have, sir?
Hey everyone, I'm Rudy. I don't stream. I am Enemy Charlie's biggest opponent in life and in every way. I have a doctorate in 20th century European thought and culture. I write mostly on literature, but a little bit on violence and politics, and I think about this stuff. So I have a one paragraph thing I'm going to just read and make clear. So my claim is basically I support all forms of protest from nonviolent to violent. I believe celebrating and encouraging a diversity of tactics is a good thing. Different situations call for different decisions and actions, and some actions are taken for which you are not the audience. In short, I do not disavow diversity of tactics. And to preempt any gotcha questions that may arise if we do like open to chat, yes, whatever form of protest you might find objectionable, I probably support. However, I do support this because nonviolent protest and demonstration, A, no longer works in the same way it did during the oft-cited example of the civil rights era, and B, falls prey to certain problems and internal contradictions, much like violent protest. And I am happy to talk about effectiveness. I echo what Hutch said. I think it's more interesting to talk about the pragmatics. I also think there are some more interesting questions of when is it appropriate? Why might nonviolent protest fail? When does it fail and how? So that's where I'm at.
Okay, and with that, let's open it up to the floor. I guess I'll start by asking, like, so for Charlie's side here, so Charlie and Rudy, just to be clear, the LA protests or riots, whatever you want to call them, with the burning Wymos, the people who were throwing rocks at cops and rocks at cop cars. You're okay with that? You don't condemn that at all? You don't think that's maybe a little ineffective or what? What are your thoughts? Go ahead.
I would say that as far as efficacy goes, me personally, I don't ever want to see any sort of violence ever. I'm not a fan of violence. However, regarding the efficacy, well, the city of Glendale did end their contract with ICE a few days ago. So that's a pretty significant win, isn't it? And that was after the burning of the Waymos and the brick throwing. So again, I do feel like as far as efficacy goes, whether it helped or hurt, something got done, didn't it?
Could I respond?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know this was thrown to Rudy as well. I want to give you a chance to answer Wick's question. But Charlie, do you agree that the LA protests were 99% nonviolent?
Yes, they were. I mean,
So given that Pasadena ended their contract with ICE, wouldn't you say that is largely due to the fact that it was nonviolent rather than violent because the protest was largely nonviolent rather than violent?
I'm not quite sure. So I did do some research into the history of violent protest in the U.S. And nonviolence and violence has shown to be effective. I would say that a good example of essentially what is a violent protest that ended up being effective was after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. There was a week of extremely violent riots around the country.
What did we get out of that other than
the Fair Housing Act of 1968? And also, I would like to point out that President Johnson did urge, governors and mayors to go and speak to people and make promises and talk. And cities that did that saw very little violence. Cities that instead, sent their police out onto protesters saw violence. So, again, I feel like it's preventable if politicians make an effort to listen and don't send their, police forces out to brutalize people.
Staxium, is it Staxiums or Staxium?
With an S at the end.
Staxium. I don't want to derail your line of questioning here, but I just want to jump in real quick because we actually do have some empirical things that we can point to evaluate the effectiveness of nonviolent versus violent protests. There's an author named Erica Chenoweth, and I guess a book that she wrote in 2011 is starting to go viral on TikTok now. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't really know. But the premise was that if no authoritarian regime in the last 100 years ever survived when at least 3.5% of the population engaged in nonviolent protest. And she analyzed hundreds, I think over 300 resistance movements. These were not like civil rights struggles. We're talking about like going up against authoritarian regimes. And what she found was that for the movements that were rooted in nonviolence, they had a little over 50% chance of succeeding. It was something like 52%. And the ones that did violent resistance, it was about half that. It was about a quarter. So if we're looking at efficiency, it's hard to make the argument that violent resistance is preferable in this situation, which is also not to say that you should never do political violence, because I don't know if anybody actually believes that in a country that was born out of a violent revolution. But I just wanted to insert that data for you guys, and then you can continue the discussion.
No, yeah, that's it. Yeah, and just to kind of jump off of what Hutch was saying, do we feel that the goal of the protest, like the primary goal, is to maximize participants, is to ensure that the largest number of people can be involved to really ensure that the politicians are watching, or the people who could do something about this are watching? Or is that not the goal?
You had something to say, Rudy, and I want to make sure Rudy gets a chance. So, go ahead.
So I kind of want to follow off of what Hutch said briefly and just add a little variable. So in 2022, there was a study done in the leading journal of political science that found by Maniskin and Mitz, and I can send it to the group chat for y'all if y'all want, but it found that between 1946 and 2006, only 1 in 5 nonviolent campaigns by ethnic minority groups resulted in success compared to 1 in 2 nonviolent campaigns by majority groups. The study they did is showing that ethnic identity moderates the success of nonviolence. It shows, they do acknowledge, Hutch, that violent campaigns have a lower general success rate, as you observed. However, it is also, nonviolence is also moderated by that same by ethnic factors. And so you have to ask, I think, and step back and say, what are the structuring principles? So if a bunch of white people, and I'm not saying the No Kings protests were only white people, the joke online is that, like, in certain parts of the country, it's just like your geriatric grandma going out, which is awesome.
Yeah.
In LA, it was wildly diverse, by the way. I mean, that's
no, it totally.
Oh yeah, because it's Los Angeles.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like, especially, sorry, not to
What do you
interrupt.
expect? What do you expect an Idaho protest to look like? Right? Like,
I had protests in Utah.
I won't be there anyway.
I live in Utah, and I went to a protest in Utah, and it's still pretty diverse. Like, still a lot. Like, almost all of our Hispanics really showed up.
I don't think that Rudy was critiquing the diversity.
No, I know. I know. I was just,
it was just
success rates. I understand. But just a question: if we all agree that our geriatric grandmas, and there was a grandma with her kid that was that went right next to me. I brought my 8-month-old son if we want to encourage that kind of behavior to sort of like keep the protests a little family friendly and to ensure that everyone's going out, obviously violence would really preclude that, right? My mom was worried to go out because of what she saw in LA. Now, I think that fear is pretty invalid, but I would say that if violence is a lot higher than it was in LA, then people might actually have justifiable reasons to not want to go out and to bring their kids and to bring their children, and for fathers and grandparents to be a little bit more hesitant to go out. And I think that's a severe. That's definitely something that we should be considering, is it not?
That's actually
Yes,
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, get Charlie first and Hutch, please.
So on that note, I was taking care of a very sick friend yesterday, so I was not out during the No Kings protest, though I wanted to be. It's my understanding that the LAPD did start firing on the peaceful protest. Did they not start? Is that I did hear reports of
they're
in my
okay.
And I will say, in my personal experience, during the summer of 2020, I did, attend some organized peaceful protests in Sacramento. And there was not looting or anything. And they did start tear gassing, and a 13-year-old boy was shot through the mouth with a rubber bullet. And it was pretty fucking awful. So, I feel you, Staxiums. I do want everyone to feel comfortable going out and protesting, but unfortunately, it's not even it doesn't really fall on the shoulders of the protesters. Like, again, even peaceful protest will. Do you not think that there's some violence?
Do you not think that there's? I agree. I largely agree with you. But don't you agree that the more peaceful the protesters will be, the more likely that the resistance will be peaceful? And at least at the very end, if we maintain be peaceful and the LAPD or whatever is violent, then that really helps the optics of the situation. I mean, like the Selma riots, for example, or the Selma marches, for example, when the police beat the protesters, that was on the front page of every magazine the next day.
Yes.
That they weren't holding anything. They were standing with their arms up and they were getting beaten by sticks. That is an incredible optics issue that 1,000 times the size of the Selma marches the next day. And I think that that's something to consider. That's something to worry about. Is that if you engage in violence, it makes the police much more likely to start attacking the crowd, and two, it hurts optics.
Okay, so
but again, you also bring up that it was a peaceful. The Selma marches were peaceful, and they were. I mean, they had whips wrapped in barbed wire, and they were beating women and old people and children with it. People died. It was horrible. And again, I get your point. But the issue is that they will get
land your plane, Charlie, and then we'll get
violence.
Okay,
sorry. Say that again.
That means protest is always going to be kind of dangerous.
No, but it's obviously more dangerous if you engage in violent protests. Yes.
Yeah, but you just brought up an example of a peaceful protest.
You disagree that
violently.
Hold on. Wait, hold on. That doesn't. Okay. If I say it's more likely to be bright out when the sun is down, and then you bring up streetlights. That's not. Yeah, it's bright there, but there's still a general principle here at stake, and you can't use anecdotal evidence to counter it. Yes, I agree that the Selma the Selma marches were extremely, extremely violent, even though the participants were peaceful. However, if they were more violent, the reaction would be more violent. Do you not agree that we're dealing with a spectrum here?
I'm just going to confound this a little bit. One, I think referencing Selma is fair. However, I do want to be cautious and note that part of the reason nonviolence was a tactic during the civil rights era, and it was not the only tactic. Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, militant black radicalism. There's debates about this in the black academic and black activist tradition that are active and ongoing. But part of the reason why it was chosen as nonviolence was there's a lot fewer options in terms of violence. The reaction would have been worse, and this goes back to that study I cited, which shows people who are not white, even if they are engaged in nonviolent protests, are perceived as automatically more violent than a bunch of white people. This happened in LA recently. Like, before people start burning Waymos, you have a lot of non-white people protesting peacefully, and I agree. We all agree it was peaceful. They are perceived as such, and the question for me is less whether it's appropriate to bring your kids or your grandma to a protest. I think we should have protests and demonstrations where those are acceptable. Like I said in my statement, awesome, go for it. But that doesn't mean every protest is the appropriate setting for your child or your grandma. I don't think
so.
that's...
Well, in the case of
let me headlines.
Hold on, let me jump in real quick here.
Stackings, I do want to let Hutch.
Let me jump in, okay? Because I was at the Los Angeles protest yesterday, and the data came in, and apparently yesterday was the largest political protest ever, literally. And in Los Angeles, it was largest single day, awesome. In Los Angeles, there was an estimated 30,000 people, but because the event was explicitly marketed as a non-violent event, I personally did not feel like there was basically any risk to me. Like, I was not concerned about the violence. People were there with their kids, but it's important to identify that there are different elements within a protest. So like, I walked around, it was like a 3 square block, or it was like a limited radius, like a 1 square mile radius where the protests were going. Some people were at City Hall, some people were over here, and then some people were outside of this federal building where Marines were posted. Now, everywhere else in the protest, it was music, dancing, smiles, funny signs. It was just completely good vibes. There was just no tension in the air. There was no violence with the cops. In fact, all the cops who were posted up were super friendly. You could have walked up to them, asked them how their day was. They would have engaged in conversation with you. These people were obviously not like Gestapo, like itching to get in there and just crack some heads. The pocket of space where the violence did break out was at the federal building where the Marines were posted up. There, it had attracted a younger kind of element, a more angry kind of element, and obviously like explicitly more kind of leftist element, you could tell. And these were people that were very obviously, if not inviting conflict with police, they were there like fully prepared for it. I mean, you could just tell it was a totally different vibe. And the crowd kept getting closer and closer and closer to the Marines. Eventually, they started throwing objects. There was a dispersal order that was given. People didn't disperse. And at that point, they chucked in tear gas. Now, I don't really know if I can call that unjustified. Would you guys say that that's unjustified for them to clear that space?
I would say that no. I mean, it's a protest. It's
for
not,
the Marines
listen,
to tear gas the protesters.
The Marines were tear gassing. It wasn't the LAPD.
No, the LA County Sheriff, I think, came in at some point. That they were the ones who came in on horseback and cleared the.
I don't think that the Marines are even allowed to be here. I think there's a huge legal issue that we're having right now with like whether or not the National Guard of Marines are even here like lawfully. So
Sure,
anything that they do,
that's not the question, though.
Going to be real bad.
I feel like you're dodging the question. Could you let's just say it was the cops then.
No, I don't think that. No, I think that people have the right to protest.
Do you think?
So,
well,
no,
can we expand on that? Can I ask you? Do you think they have the right to like throw bricks or bottles, this kind of thing?
Do I think that they have the right to?
Yeah.
I think that we have the right to do essentially anything, but there can be legal consequences.
That's not
based
a
on
right.
your
Then.
actions.
The whole idea for right to free speech is that there won't be legal consequences for your speech. That's why it's a right.
Except, hold on, your example, Staxians, I want to just bring you back to the Selma example. They were peaceful, nonviolent protesters.
Of course.
It right. And that right.
And that was an infringement on right to free protest, of course.
But my point here is, so briefly, again, I want to also briefly like circle back and then I'll weave back to where we are. But there was an earlier question, I think, Hutch, you asked about like effectiveness and or maybe Staxians, one of y'all asked about like effectiveness of peaceful and nonviolent wings. And I think Hutch, you hinted at having these different wings is important. And it is actually in the literature about this, in social science literature, the evidence there seems to be having a violent wing, a small quadrant, let's use the LA example, having that small quadrant of people versus the majority who are moderate actually ends up leading to better results because this is the social science literature.
I don't know what that means.
5 years.
I really don't know what that means because like the people that were more hostile and the ones that were sort of inviting conflict, and I was there, I saw it, they were throwing shit. I would argue they put other people around them at risk they end up sort of driving the narrative. They end up, hold on, let me finish. They end up driving the narrative. And so what should be a national conversation about like the largest peaceful protest day ever, this stuff sucks up all the oxygen. These people were not there to protest ICE. A lot of these people were there to these people are, it has more to do with ideas. They're either anarchists or they're leftists or they're agitators. They want to create conditions for revolution. So for them, it's like more ideologically based.
Respectfully, I think you're missing the point here of what I was trying to say. My point is the evidence in the social science literature is pretty clear that having a violent flank at a protest actually helps the odds of getting political and policy changes, because policymakers will then work with the moderate wings of that protest. That is clear in recent literature.
So is it?
These people are not our flank, though.
You're talking over each other. Let Hutch finish his point, and then you can go Saxons, and then we'll get into it. I promise.
I'm trying to set the premise here that the people I'm speaking about, the ones that are here about like radical ideology, they are not like our flank. They're not even a part of the movement. They're an outside group that have their own agenda that people like me and probably 99% of the people that were at the protest, they want nothing to do with that. So I have no idea how you could make the case. You're just kind of vaguely pointing to literature, but I don't know how you can make the case that having like a small group of agitators benefits me at all when my purpose as a part of some movement is to be explicitly rooted in nonviolence.
So what was your could I ask like what your purpose was yesterday? So I imagine you live in Los Angeles or close to it. So protesting ICE is not something that you were there for. What were you there for specifically?
The point of the protest yesterday was just no kings, just kind of fighting against Trump's authoritarianism, but it was also like obviously very much steeped in the ICE stuff as well. It affected our community directly. But I mean, to answer your question broadly, the purpose that I would like to see in terms of a large, collective, organized, disciplined movement is electoral victories, like garnering support for the cause, getting people to become engaged in the political process so that we can win elections, take their majority in 2026, and then hopefully get a trifecta in 2028. But for me, it all just comes down to, like, I know we're not going to be able to physically stop ICE from doing the things that they're doing. I mean, if people want to engage in civil disobedience and put their bodies on the line, I'm not going to say that that's wrong, as long as it's nonviolent. But that is the larger goal. I think we're not going to beat Donald Trump by engaging in violence. That's just going to make him stronger. I mean, do you guys agree with that? Wait, can I just ask the question though? Do you agree that engaging in violence helps Donald Trump?
No, I would not agree with that.
Really?
I would like to bring up Hutch. I mean, again, the urgency might not be there for you or for me or any of us who are white and presumably natural born citizens of the US. Again, this is not an extreme and immediate threat to our families.
Okay, can you fuck off with the assumptions for 2 seconds?
Let her go.
I don't know why you just got aggressive with me.
Because I have a very close family member who is right now undocumented and at threat with ICE. So like the idea that emergency and that we don't care about this situation and that we don't care about the utility of this movement matters to us is frankly offensive.
Okay, well then I'm surprised then that you are. I would assume that you would be angrier, frankly.
If you feel like I'm not fucking angry at Donald Trump and ICE, you haven't met me. That's not what the conversation's about. But if there was a conservative here justifying Donald Trump's actions and the way that he has utilized ICE, I'd be screaming at him right now. So like, I do want that perspective. Would you put your body on the line to protect your family member? Is the absolutely,
thing?
Absolutely,
okay.
Of course.
Then can you understand why?
Of course I can understand. That's why I opened with my opening to say I understand these actors feeling like they need to resort to violence. That violence is the language of the unheard. Of course I understand that. But from a pragmatic point of view, they are hurting our movement. So I am kindly and respectfully asking them, please hold in that violence because you are not helping. You are acting irrationally and impassionately, but it's not helping the situation, and I'm asking you to stop.
would say that, again, I don't know if it's necessarily hurting. I do think, regardless of what was happening in Los Angeles, the No Kings had a huge turnout, and I think were like very, very successful. Like it's, hold on one second. Hold on. My notifications are being really loud right now. Okay, we're good. Anyway, and I can't talk when there's like.
You said that the protest was successful.
Yeah, the No Kings, do you feel like that was a successful demonstration of, unhappiness with Donald Trump? Okay, so again,
Absolutely, yeah.
With the wins in Glendale, with Glendale like ending its contract with ICE, I think that's really sick and awesome. And the No Kings had a huge turnout. So again, I don't think that it's necessarily hurting anything. I also think that, I mean, my goodness, we all know that the conservative memory of the summer of 2020 was like the country was burning down. And yet Biden won. So again, I don't think that it necessarily hurts the movement.
Well, I mean,
you were dealing it with matters of degrees.
Let's respond just real quick.
I mean, I just want to circle. I want to circle back to the question of like, I don't know how you could come to the conclusion that the violence doesn't help Donald Trump. Number one, if what we did see with the violence in 2020 was that after like weeks and months of sustained rioting, mostly at night, it was mostly peaceful, but there was a lot of damage that happened that year. We did see that it actually hurt Democrats politically. They lost seats in the House when they gained seats in the Senate and won the presidency. A lot of that was because of fear of this violence and the defund rhetoric. Not all of it, but that was a part of it. And we can see that, can you understand that? Like, okay, so I feel like my take is that Donald Trump is baiting this violence. Like he wants violence to happen so that he can justify sending in military forces into other cities. Like, I think he's deliberately provoking this violence to cause unrest and potentially politically damage like blue mayors and governors. And then also he wants to justify sending in more military. And also he knows that the imagery of like violence, burnt Waymo cars and things like that actually helps him and turns off normies. I don't know how you couldn't reach that conclusion. Can you explain that to me?
I would say that, frankly, what happened in LA, I mean, brought a global spotlight on, the country. And in fact, Donald Trump sending in the military on a global scale, the optics look really bad. He looks like a dictator. So frankly, and I do think that might have like increased No Kings turnout, because again, no matter how people feel about the property damage and the minimal violence at the LA protests, we can't argue that it didn't make the world go, oh my God, when Donald Trump sent the Marines and the National Guard to California. Like, would we agree on that?
So you agree that optics is a huge priority, but you think that the violence actually helped optics because the response from Donald Trump was so like disproportionate?
I think that could be it. I mean, only time will tell, but I do think that, like, at least on a global scale, I've seen people around the world go, oh my God, America is like full fascist. This is crazy.
Okay.
And I think it is upsetting to people in our country as well to see this happen. I think it sounded the alarms in many blue states for people to go, holy fuck, this could be us next. Do you know what I mean?
I guess I see what you mean. From my perspective, whenever we deal with these sort of political movements, the goal is never, there's three different things that we could focus on. The first is rallying up our base, which that's almost never my concentration because we're locked in already, given Donald Trump's actions. The second is changing conservative minds. That's not going to fucking happen anytime soon. We've all seen that old comic of, Martin Luther King going, oh, it's nonviolent, and there's like a whole bunch of wreckage. That's their perspective regardless. However, the moderates can be changed. Yep. The moderates can look at a riot and look at a protest and go, everyone's actually really peaceful and holding up signs that are actually, we care about immigrants. We love immigrants and we want diversity. We care about diversity in this
American flags.
And it's not hateful. What?
And American flags. I mean, the imagery,
American flags, right, and maybe some Mexican flags there too, and maybe some state flags, and maybe some like a whole bunch of songs and dances and things like that really bring together the country. And having people have that perspective when they're driving along, looking at the protest, being like, that honestly looks like fun. That looks like a movement that cares about the people within it. And yeah, maybe there's a couple middle fingers, maybe a couple fuck Trump things, whatever. It's kind of blinded out by the large spectacle of the thing. I don't get why that's not so obviously the goal of these protests.
I think that the goal of protests, and I think that the way protests are successful is when they disrupt the daily lives of people to such a degree that local and state politicians are forced to make policy changes that the people want. So I don't really think that, I think that again,
Let her finish, please.
Sure.
like on a national
Sure.
level, maybe, but again, my concern here, and I think that if the goal is to, encourage politicians in Los Angeles and cities in Los Angeles and SoCal to stop working with ICE, I don't think that waving some signs is going to do much. I think that whether it could be peaceful or not peaceful, but you have to do things like bother people. You have to stop traffic. You have to be a nuisance.
I mean, we're a statewide sanctuary state, so we already brought
we still have ICE in here, which is bad.
No, but our policies is that we don't cooperate with ICE. That's the difference. So
had a contract with them, and the LAPD has not been doing.
I'd have to look into the specific details of that contract, but as far as the policies go, California is already broadly with when it comes to ICE have policies
not doing enough. If ICE is showing up at Home Depot,
well, what do you want them to do? Wait, hold on. What do you want them to do? What do you want the California government to do about that?
Something.
No, come on, you got to give me. No, you got to get. No, how are they aiding and abetting? What do you mean?
Bothering protesters that are, protesting ICE, and I think even protecting ICE.
Wait, but what do you want them to do?
Can we go back to Hutch's question though? Because Hutch asked a question an hour ago.
Saxians, please.
Sorry.
What do you?
Sorry about that.
What do you want Gavin Newsom to do? What do you want California to do in terms of stopping ICE? Are you asking for a military conflict?
Jesus.
This is
fuck. Maybe. Something more than what he's doing, fighting it.
I'm not so sure that would work out the way that you want it to work out. But I guess the point is that the state is already, they already kind of do these policies that you want them to do. So I don't know about obviously there's some element of disruption that can be valid. But in the case of I'm not really sure I understand the tactical value of blocking off a freeway. When the majority of people that you're preventing from going home in a freeway in a city like Los Angeles, where there's 10 million people, if you block a freeway, the consequences are actually we're talking about disruption on a scale that is it could be very, very, very bad. And for what? What are the goals with that? When people see that, they just get pissed off. I don't really understand.
It's to bother. The point is not to get people on your side. It is to encourage local and state politicians to do something.
Wait, it absolutely should be.
Really annoying until you do something. You do have the numbers.
That's wild to me. The idea that
they're already blocking.
I do want to get Rudy, and Rudy's been very good today. He's been such a good boy, and he wants to get in, and he's been trying, and he's been the most pro-violence, but the least disruptive, weirdly. So go ahead, Rudy. I'm going to give it to you for a second, and and we'll pass it back to Hutch and Staxium.
So I'm just going to note, again, my original statement is I support the full diversity and range. I'm not going to disavow that full range, which means I support shutting down a freeway, but I also support the No Kings rally. However, I will note that getting on our high horses and excited about the momentum there is only good insofar as those on this panel who are on the more moderate center lib side, which is cool. I don't have an antagonism with you all fundamentally beyond disagreements about tactics. If your contingent really pushes the campaign, the energy, especially in the states where there was a rightward swing for the elections, hell yeah. And I'm happy to eat the crow and say, hey, I was wrong. I underestimated how much hatred there was towards Donald Trump. Everyone really mobilized. However, if all we are doing is one large single-day protest, and there isn't that continued momentum for the goals that Hutch has outlined that he would like to see, And I think at some level, it's like, cool. You had a nice little party and a barbecue with a bunch of people, and that looked cool, but it led nowhere. So we're talking about future hypotheticals here. My point there is, if it leads somewhere good, awesome. I will get on board with it. I don't want more conservatives in office either. I don't want more Republican wins. We agree on that.
There's a misconception about the level of protests that's going on, because actually, you wouldn't guess it, but actually this time around, there have been more protests across the country in the first 100 days compared to the first term, which is a fact that surprised me, but it's true nonetheless. But when we talk about disruption, I can understand disrupting something for some sort of tactical purpose. Like if you wanted to shut down a particular road because it led to that detention center, and so you're actually disrupting something tangible that you were protesting, that's one thing. And I guess sometimes I could see that being valid. But when you shut down a freeway, what are you exactly disrupting? You're disrupting the LA citizenry, you're disrupting local business. And for what, I was a little awestruck a moment ago when I heard Charlie say that the purpose of protests is to not have people sympathetic to your cause. That's not a part of, that's not a part of your
clarification on some of the social science literature on the topic, just because before this I prepped a little bit just so that I wasn't talking out of my ass about this. There are, again, this is why I support the diversity of tactics. Peaceful protests like the No Kings protests are really fucking powerful, and not just No Kings, the peaceful ones in the first 100 days, let's go with that, are really good for mobilizing people who are generally dispositionally aligned with your side. They might not be fully on board, but they are predisposed to that position. More radical protests tend to be effective for drawing even more eyes to a larger movement. And this is what I was saying earlier, which I think you might have misunderstood, Hutch, is having a more radical wing does end up making it make it easier for local policymakers to engage with the more moderate wing. This happened in the civil rights area that we keep referring to. You had the black radical wing, which led to more discussions with civil rights leaders. This happened in 2020. There was a police station which was burned down in Minneapolis, which I think, I'm not going to disavow that as a tactic. Because of these mixture of things, you have this tension.
Rudy didn't also lead to the election of what's his fucking name? Nixon, which basically rolled back and refused to implement a lot of the policy changes that the civil rights movement had won.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
It led to his election.
So you're going to blame
the civil rights movement led
for years.
No. He's talking about the violence. The violence directly led to Nixon getting elected on a platform of returning the country to law and order.
Do we have sources on that? I guess I've never heard that before.
This is okay. Well, I mean, that was a central focal point of Nixon's campaign, was returning the country to law and order. This was a time of tremendous upheaval, violence that well eclipses what we see now. And the normies got totally freaked out, and Nixon was able to weaponize their fear. And that was a huge part of why he won. This was very well established.
Regardless of sources about what specifically it is, it was certainly part of his campaign.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that that's probably exactly why he won.
It was a big reason. It was a big reason.
I think that Donald Trump's win. Sure. I think that every time a president wins, it's complicated why they won.
Of course. But can you acknowledge that was part of their campaign? It was clearly a winning strategy because he won, and it was a large part of his campaign.
Sure, yeah. But I mean, did Biden campaign on restoring law and order?
Kind of.
A little bit.
A lot of the violence in the BLM protest.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, but
I would also say the
crackdown level of Richard Nixon.
I would not say that at all. Yeah, correct. Yeah. Hutch might disagree. I'll let Hutch speak for himself, but I would not say that Biden campaigned on law and order. I think that he disavowed the violence of the BLM riots for sure, but largely he 100% supported the protests and said, these people I agree with. He said multiple. I remember this story that he said about his son coming to him, watching black people getting carried away to prison, and his son was like, hey, if that was me, dad or grandpa, just so you know, I don't I don't think I would have been taken away to prison. Like, why is it different for me than it is for them? And he was like, shoot. And he told this story, and it was part of like, I support the Black Lives Matter protests. So I don't think that Biden. What is the question? I don't understand the function of this question.
Well, you guys or Hutch was arguing that Richard Nixon got into office by campaigning on restoring law and order.
Right. I would say Black Lives Matter is much more peaceful than the LA riots were in '68, or the MLK riots were.
So, quick question then for Hutch and Daxiums. To what degree? So, obviously, I've happily put myself in the corner of being the most pro-violence member of this panel.
Sure.
And I do want to, I'm just curious. I have two questions, two-part question. Yeah, let's do that. One, what counts as violence to you? So I'd like to kind of maybe hear what you guys think of as like defined as violence. I'm just curious of like that. Two, I would ask then, what percentage of, let's narrow it down since 2016. So let's just keep it narrow so we're not having these weird historical like detailed niche historical squabbles. What percentage of, like, if you ballpark, I'm not asking for data, I'm just ballparking vibe coding mode here, of the protests of Black Lives Matter, et cetera, what percentage do you think were violent?
Less than 1%.
The big question is like what?
I would agree with Hutch.
Less than 1%.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so how would you define violence?
Property damage and physical violence against other people.
I don't know if, I mean, property damage seems like a gray area. I don't know if I would throw that in. I guess I would say that that's probably violent.
You wouldn't consider it violent if someone set a car on fire.
I would. It's a gray area.
Right?
I guess, yeah, it's a gray area. But like here, all we're doing is we're hyper stratifying
all this shit. Kind of violent.
We're hyper stratifying the definition. I don't care about my definition or your definition. I just want to have an agreed upon definition. Okay. So
yeah, I think that's
the definition I would have is personal harm. Anything that like brought harm to a person. Now I understand that obviously we can generalize violence so much so that it can include a lot of different things, but so I want to work with a shared understanding of violence rather than try to hyper-stratify.
I would argue that I think that, again, I think property damage can be a very, very gray area. I think that there's property damage that can potentially hurt people, which would be bad. And I don't mean financially, I mean like lead to physical harm. But by and large, I don't think that property damage counts as violence.
Just to be clear,
Sorry,
I don't mean to keep speaking over you, but I do want to just be clear. I disavow property damage during protests. I think that it is largely bad, generally speaking, right now, given these protests. Obviously, there's going to be historical examples where I'm going to disagree with them, right? There's going to be times where that is important. We can obviously bring out the Revolutionary War and 1,000 others on top of that. But yeah, I just want to be clear when I'm saying it's violent. It's not violent. I don't mean that it's might not be good. I think it's bad.
There's a spectrum of violence here. So some violence is clearly worse than other violence. So if I punch someone, that's going to be worse than me setting a car on fire, I think, generally. But when we look at the textbook definition of the word violence, it's just characterized as a use of physical force by humans to cause harm to other living beings or property, such as pain, injury, so this is just, like, I'd feel like let's not get bogged down on the definition and just say like what types of violence, what types of violence you condone and what types of violence you don't condone.
But I just want to be okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we're losing the point. I guess.
Rudy, what was
I was just trying.
Yeah, what's the point of your question? Is why I'm asking. Why are you asking them about what is their definition of violence? Go ahead.
I just wanted to get clarification for the same reason Staxiums had. I kind of wanted to see if we were on the same, generally in the same field of like, are we working with the same word and how we're using it? Because I would not call property damage generally violent. And so I was just trying to make sure we're on the same page of like, so if I'm on that page and Hutch is over there, then we're never going to talk and we'll end up arguing over a fucking semantic thing. So I was just trying to see if we could find like a middle where we could find like a term where we're using it and we're all
agree on property violence, correct? Or property damage.
Let me ask you a question. Do you tacitly or explicitly condone all forms of violence? So like that would include people that are there just chasing catharsis, because you guys understand that, especially in a city like Los Angeles, 10 million people, there's going to be a certain element of people that show up that have nothing to do with ideology or politics or current events. They are just there to do destruction. Like, do you think that is a valid form of protest, or would you just call that rioting?
I think that there's always going. Rudy, you can go ahead.
So I would say I endorse political violence insofar as it is aimed at the continued expansion of freedom of others. So by that I mean, if you think of, there's a famous example from the French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir where she talks about how a 16-year-old Nazi yells Heil Hitler and you have to shoot him. And she goes, ideally we would re-educate the kid, but it's in the middle of the war and we don't have the time to re-educate him, so we have to eliminate the enemy. But this is for the sake of the freedom of a larger number of people. So yes, I would endorse it insofar as it frees other people.
Can I clarify the question? Could I ask just ask a question about your answer? Do you care about intent or outcome? Like, do you care that they're intending to give the freedom of others, or do you care that they are actually, in effect, creating the freedom of others?
I think it is. I care primarily about intent. I do care about outcome, but I do think outcome is very difficult to measure. So I'm a little bit more hesitant to only endorse outcomes.
Would you
acknowledge that some people with proper intentions who do actually believe in the movement will have actions that will actively cripple the movement that they believe in? Because that's what I'm concerned about. That's what I'm concerned about during this conversation. Because I agree that we're all on the same page about the movement, unless we disagree. But I think that we're all kind of on the same page.
We're all
Sure.
essentially in the same. Yeah.
So I don't care about your guys' intent, because I think your intents are good. Your intention is good. Mm-hmm. But I do think that the outcome is actively crippling the political movement that we are all on the same page about. And that does suck.
Yeah. I want to give back to Hutch to finish his line of questioning, and then I have a question. So go ahead.
The question I want to ask you guys is: do you make a distinction between rioting and political violence? Because to me, those are two very different things.
Rioting, I would like when I think of like riot, I think of like Philadelphia after whatever their sports team is wins or loses, or Boston, and the Birds, whatever, or Boston, and they start like breaking shit for no reason. That to me would be like a riot. I think that I would say political violence against property or individuals. I would say it has a political goal in mind, essentially policy changes.
Okay, I mean, so like. Yeah, I guess where I'm going with that is like the Stack Sims was just talking about intent. The intent of the violence is like really, really important. As I said, I think probably everybody on the panel agrees. I would never say that political violence is never okay. We can see examples of violent resistance that has been perfectly justified all throughout history. But what you're actually trying to get from that violence and how you apply that violence, I think really, really matters. So any kind of violence that is undisciplined, that is not directed at any particular thing, that is just inherently, I think, counterproductive. It doesn't really lead to anything positive. If you're doing violence with the intent of like sabotage or something like that, then that could be valid, and many times in history it has been valid. I don't understand the point. Like, I don't understand if you're chasing catharsis, which I think a lot of people in these situations are, they just want to feel empowered. They want to feel like they're fighting against some, corrupt authority. Then I don't think that is productive. I don't think that's the kind of violence that, people like Mandela would have supported, for example. It has to have a function. It has to have a point. You're just chasing a feeling, then it's just a very kind of selfish thing to do, because you're putting other people at risk and you're undermining the movement by doing that.
Just two things. First, I totally hear your point, Hutch. I do think this goes back to something you actually said earlier when you were responding to Charlie, which is we do have to contextualize this, because I think about like violence and political violence and riots and the kind of that blurry line of where that crosses. I think of a European context, which is where I'm trained in. I think of a city like Hamburg, where they had, I think the G20 thing in 2018 came, a bunch of leaders were there. Hamburg has a 70-plus year history of anti-fascist activism, anarchist movements, and you had tens of thousands of people, locals, black bloc alike, all together in a giant protest with riots, things being thrown, and everybody was there. So again, it's context dependent. Second, I would also just note that Mandela never actually formally disavowed the armed wing of the ANC, ever.
Wait, hold on.
He never publicly endorsed it, but he never disavowed the armed wing.
Let Hutch go. I know you both want to answer this, but Hutch, go.
All right.
And then we'll
He
go.
very, I mean, he very explicitly favored a policy of sabotage, directed, disciplined violence. It's true that he never explicitly condemned violence, but I think he was kind of doing what Charlie was doing in the beginning, and what, like the MLK quote, for example, the riots are the language of the unheard. That was not him condoning violence. MLK very obviously did not condone violence, but what he was saying was that you need to understand why the violence is happening, and that's the bigger issue.
Yeah.
But Mandela was yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I don't mean to interrupt. I do think I am generally, as again, the violent one on the panel, I think I would be more predisposed to a diversity of tactics if the people engaged in political violence were more targeted and were more strategic. However, that is a conversation that does happen among anarchist circles. It does not happen online.
Rudy,
chronically online people are not. And so I would say,
I'd like to ask a question, Rudy.
Yeah, it just
continue,
let him finish first, and then and you can ask your question. And I have a question maybe, because I think we're dancing around something, and I want to just ask you guys straight out. But go ahead, Rudy.
So my only point there, I guess I'll finish and wrap it up as quickly, is, again, I think in my opening statement when I say I don't disavow things, part of it is a tactical thing of tactical and kind of optics thing of, like, it looks fucking weird to me to be a person who is not affected by the raids in LA, for example, the ICE raids, to tell a bunch of people from South Central and East LA who are affected, hey, how dare you get mad? I live in fucking Orange County. I don't live in LA. It looks weird. And so from an optics thing, if we're talking optics, it just looks weird. So I just don't disavow it. However, I do think, to Hutch's point, when I say I do avow a diversity of tactics, that includes very targeted and strategic uses of political violence. I do avow that.
Okay, I have two questions for Rudy. Part one, really, is there a form of protesting that you would disavow, that you feel like maybe the way that it's configured just doesn't sit right with you, or you disagree morally or strategically or anything like that? Part B, you have said a couple times that you feel like violent wings within a nonviolent structure is more likely to be effective. So I guess my question is, if you were in a completely nonviolent protest, everyone's dancing, having a good time, would you hand a brick to someone and say, yo, you got to throw this at a police officer, otherwise, because this will increase the chances of this working? Like, how committed, how willing are you to bite this bullet of violence, where you would start encouraging people to engage in violence so much so, like, at the risk of that? Well, that's why I'm asking him.
No, so to clarify, to answer two questions. First, to your first question, I'll just use the example of Charlottesville. Charlottesville is a kind of a protest I would disavow. I would also
Lambda Smudge, the Boo Clams,
because of the
Dillis Filler, Jungle Gyms. Thank you guys for the resubs.
That's it.
Appreciate it.
Hold on, stop. Okay, so just to be clear, I want to understand what you're saying, Rudy. You would be okay with a leftist January 6th. So if, right?
Okay, well, let's not like Fed
can I finish answering? Can we also?
I'm not. Okay, I just want to know the answer to the question, right? You can be as euphemistic as you want, but I want to know what. Like, let me deal with the toss implications, right?
Okay, well, I'm also streaming, Wick.
Oh, that's true. You are too.
I am streaming, so I don't.
I just answer. I was just trying to answer Staxium's two questions. Can I just answer those two? So I think I answered the first one.
I'm gonna get to mine though, but answer your question.
No, you can go in and ask after, but can you let me just finish? So
yes. Sorry, Rudy.
I think that would be the first gesture towards an answer to your first question. Your second question was, would I hand someone a brick and saying I feel this way? It's not that I feel this way. I'm citing actual social science research on this matter. And so it's not a feeling. So I'll quote the social science thing I'm reading from 2022. Results of two experiments conducted with diverse samples of 2,700 people, including a study of the animal rights movement and a pre-registered study of the climate movement, show that the presence of a radical flank increases support for a moderate faction within the same movement. It is the use of radical tactics, such as property destruction or violence, rather than a radical agenda that drives this effect. Results indicate the effect owes to a contrast effect. Use of radical tactics by one flank led the more moderate faction to appear less radical.
But I'm
not going to Fed post. It's not vibes. I'm not just going off vibes here.
Well, this is not the same. This is not the same movement, though. That's a hugely important factor of this discussion. You're talking about attacking, like in a singular movement with a difference of tactics, like hitting different flanks. But the protest that was organized yesterday, all across the country, was explicitly nonviolent, and you could see plenty of examples all over the country of event organizers that were stepping in to sort of curb people's instincts and to sort of like push them out if they were doing that kind of stuff. So definitionally, like the people that came in and actually did agitate, like Seattle got pretty bad, they're actually not a part of this movement. And quite frankly, I don't want any part of their ideology. Like they are looking for revolution. It has nothing to do with the No Kings event.
Okay, can we let Wick ask his question? Because I got it. You guys are dancing around this. I understand we don't want a Fed post, but I just gotta ask, would you be okay? I'm not asking if you would do it, right? But would you be okay? Would you be supportive of someone in this time, right? In the world we live in today. So I'm not talking about Nazi Germany. I'm not talking about Iran or in some oppressive Russian regime, the USSR. I'm talking today. Right?
Give more examples. We're confused.
Someone killing an ICE agent who is trying to deport their relative.
Wait, can we talk about that on this platform? I don't know if we could do that.
I don't want to answer that question because I don't
want
want anyone to get in trouble.
Would you be okay with them physically getting into an altercation and fighting them?
I feel like even that sketch, bro.
Wick, I feel like we can.
Yeah.
Yes, Wick, this is sketch.
The question, okay, this is a problem. If we can't answer this question, if we can't even discuss it, it's very hard to have this conversation because
Wick, I think
it
I
is
answered
very
that
hard to have
question
this
in my opening
conversation.
statement. My opening statement, I'll read you again.
We know your answer.
No, look, I said this.
you guys are cowards.
No, Wick, I answered your question already. Wick. In short, so in an attempt to preempt the gotcha questions that may come from chat or Wick in this case, yes, whatever form of protest you might find objectionable, I probably support it. So yes, I already answered the
Wick.
question.
Because I'll actually answer your question. I don't give a fuck. But here, let me really try to dial down. Are you saying I'm the person being taken away, or I'm the relative, and my relative is being taken away?
Wick?
I'm trying to understand.
All right. No, it's your relative that you talked about. ICE is coming. They're going to deport him, right?
I would say no, but that's only because it's ineffective.
Okay.
That's only because it doesn't work. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
That's the only reason.
Yeah.
But that's a good reason, right?
Yeah, that's a great reason. Of course, it's a great reason.
I think you have to be practical and ask yourself, okay, so like, what are my goals? If I'm going to do violence, what are my goals with the violence? If your goal, if your goal is to like stop ICE from doing what they're going to be able to do, that's not a fight. That is not a fight you're going to win. So then what
will lead to me in prison and my family member deported? So it's like then I can just have my family member deported.
So then that leads to the next question, which is like, okay, well, if that doesn't work, what's the best way to fight this? And I would argue that the best way to fight this is to garner support for your cause, to have as many normies, like really aggressively attack the normies, the people that don't really engage in politics too much. If you can get them to start calling their local representative or senator, you can actually put political pressure on this administration to take action. Yeah.
Hutch, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
We're talking about political violence and kind of strategic tactical things. And I know you've already said you don't want anything to do with the anarchist side. That's fine. They probably don't want anything to do with you.
They don't.
So it's probably a mutual feeling.
Yeah.
So we're good on that front. So let's say you, Hutch, using your platform, you're spending all your energy for the next couple of years mobilizing, you're going out, you're getting the normies, you're helping with that. Would you be opposed to an anarchist doing a very strategic and targeted tactic to divert, say they did a choke point on like an ICE station, or they diverted energy or did something to really target something in a specific manner? Would, even if you don't avow it, would that be too far for you if it was strategic and targeted?
It's not that. Go ahead, Charlie.
Can I jump in slightly? Just for TOS stuff. I think that maybe like, so that none of us get in big trouble or deplatformed. Could we keep it? No. We can discuss real life violence, but can we keep it
be general? Just be vague.
From just vagueness, and also not be like, because you get, I feel like Wick, you almost got pretty in big trouble. Can we not do like a? Would you believe in this? Would you like this? Can we say would it be effective? Do we think it would be effective?
So my question.
To answer you, no, I can answer your question. So I would in that instance, I would not support that because okay, what are you going to do? You're going to create a choke point for what, like a couple hours? Like, they will come in and push you out, and it will ultimately be unsuccessful. And so again, it just when you confront that reality of like this is just not going to work. Like if we try to physically engage with the state in this way, we're just not going to be successful. And so what are the risks? Jail time, felonies, and then what are the benefits? Literally none. And so then you have to go to, okay, well, what can we do? And then you get to this very practical answer of like working within the institutions, working within the system itself to create political pressure.
Can I add two things and just ask one question? One follow-up question to Hutch for that, and then a quick point. So first follow-up question, and then my point. My follow-up question is, are you willing to acknowledge that perhaps while the moderate kind of centrist wing is doing the normie push, that tactic, even if it isn't long-term effective, might not be targeted to the normies and might be targeted to a specific audience to radicalize them further? Can you at least acknowledge that that might be a possibility of why that tactic is engaged in?
Well, I'm talking about radicalizing normies to your cause. Like I'm talking about like getting people to change their fundamental opinions about law enforcement and this sort of a thing. If you're asking like, should we try to radicalize people into what? Into what ideology are you trying to radicalize them?
Could I actually?
I guess my follow-up point.
I think I disagree with Hutch. Just by the way, I disagree with Hutch. So that might be of interest. I think that we're going to have to be really specific, and maybe, Charlie really doesn't want me to be specific here, but there are a ton of actions that anarchists could do that I 100% think are great. I usually don't agree with anarchists, but there were libertarians with Gadsden flags at the No Kings protest. And I was like, fuck yeah, more hands on deck. If it helps the outcome, it helps the outcome. If you disable vehicles or things like that, and the state starts realizing they can't catch who's ever doing this, and the state puts so much money into this that they're realizing it's an overwhelming amount of money and it's not worth it. I think that there is a potential, if they're very strategic, that I would absolutely endorse that. But again, it's all about outcomes to me. It's all about outcomes.
So just following up on that really quickly, sorry. This goes back to my kind of European context, and this is for me where the failing of the U.S. left is, and I think you two might agree with me on this. I think the U.S. left on its more radical fringes is too chronically online and has not learned lessons from peers in other nations about certain strategic tactics that could be effective. To that end, though, Staxium's your point about anarchists doing cool things. It's not always property damage, and it's not always physical violence. A lot of anarchists will build really cool computer open source code and shit. They will also do a lot of cool hacking stuff. A lot of the people doing that good work on the internet to keep the internet free are anarchists. Second, I would say anarchists need, again, this is mostly chronically online idiots in the U.S., to be quite blunt. She didn't win, but there was an anarchist, I think in New Hampshire, who ran for her sheriff's office to try to actually get into power and use that power to do something good. I do think more radical left folks need to get on their local counties and county politics. I think if you're in LA and you're on the left, you should try to find a way to get into the sheriff's office, because the LA Sheriff's Department is way worse than LAPD and is one of the most corrupt, evil organizations in this area.
Well, I think
that's part of tactics.
I'm going to let Charlie go, but once she goes, I need to read my super chats, and then we'll get back to the discussion.
Well,
so, Charlie,
I guess just to bring it all back, and again, I think that we are placing the I don't know how to phrase this, essentially the burden of violence onto protesters. When someone brought up South Korea in my chat, I do feel in a way that I think all of us could probably agree that we are in some ways being failed by our politicians. I certainly don't feel like not enough is being done to kind of curb the injustices that both citizens and undocumented people in the United States are facing. Whereas, again, it almost feels like I feel many Americans feel forced into taking action, and we shouldn't be forced. I mean, like our congressmen and women should be fucking scaling, gates and shit like they did in Korea. Like there should be more happening. And again, I don't think I don't know. I feel like too much of the burden is being placed on the people versus our politicians.
So I would love to respond to that.
I understand.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, you said super chat. I apologize, Blake.
I gotta get my super chat money, but
You're right,
respond
I'm
real quick. Go ahead for the purpose of the discussion.
I definitely believe that homelessness is a policy choice. This is an analogy. I'll use this real quick. Homelessness is a policy choice. Okay, that is 100% a state enforced issue that we don't spend enough money on. That we need to talk about zoning regulations and all that kind of stuff in order to get that fixed. However, my brother was homeless. Okay, and when I talked to him, I'm like, bro, you need to step the fuck up. You need to go get a job. You need to stop doing all these sorts of things that are getting you in this situation, and you need to bring yourself out of the situation. Now, is the onus on the state and not on him? I guess, yeah, if I were talking to the state, absolutely. But I'm not talking to the state. I'm talking to him. And he right now cannot fix the state. The state is the issue, but he right now is not the issue. Or sorry, we can't fix that right now. So I would talk to him and I'd say, here's how we fix the issue for you. Okay. Now, you are not the politicians. So I'm talking to you. But if I'm talking to the politicians, I'm like, stop fucking worrying about 2 or 3 people who are setting Waymos on fire, and actually deal with ICE agents who are deporting illegal immigrants and during amnesty trials, kidnapping people during that and not offering due process, of course. But I'm not talking to politicians right now. And sometimes it feels frustrating that we can't engage in a conversation because we're not yelling at a politician.
Well, we're engaging in conversation right now.
But you're saying we have to be, the onus is on the state and we have to only talk to the state. That we can't.
I didn't say that at all, but I think that the burden of violence is on our politicians.
There's no violence. There's no.
I think is on them.
There's no onus. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm going to give it to Charlie as soon as I'm done. But again, people pay me money to say things, and I gotta pay money. Right, and you guys, if you want to say things, we're going to read the super chats again at the end of the panel, so in about an hour. So keep giving me your money. $10 from Miles Kinslow to say there is no excuse for violence and vandalism. Riots can economically destroy a neighborhood and take years to recover. Absolutely ridiculous. The consequences could lead to anyway, possibly civil war. Thank you for the $10. $10 from Parallax to say, please tell Hutch that whoever told him looking like a Nazi would improve the way they receive his messaging lied. That look is terrible. I can't tell if he's going to sell me substances or burn a cross. Thank you for the $10, I guess. $2 to say from the Trib to say the Hutch is bald. Very, very bald. Thank you.
The choice.
For the $2.
It's a choice. The lifestyle choice.
Okay. $5 from Audacity to say, I may have missed it, but did they clarify between property damage and destruction of property? Not sure, but yeah. And then $5 from Fletch, Fletch83 at Charlie. The problem is that the citizenry has been too hands off, asleep at the wheel, some would say. And thank you for the $5. I just, I'll take this moment to kind of give you my point, because I think I'm further anti-violence than maybe Staxium's here, and probably maybe Hutch, or definitely Staxium's. I think that the first thing a Democratic politician should do when they see any sort of violence done at a protest is condemn it vociferously and say that, hey, we're going to get you, we're going to arrest anyone who engages in it, because it will make it easier for them to actually fix the problem at hand, which is ICE deporting people with using heavy-handed tactics, violating constitutional rights, etc. Because I think that the population as a whole, the populace as a whole, people as a whole, they don't like violence, right? And so they will side with whatever side they feel, what they view as is doing the violence. They're going to be against that side. They're going to be for the side that has having the violence done unto them. And that's why it's very effective. If the cops beat you up and you don't fight back, you win, frankly. Anyway, Charlie, I said I'd give the mic back to you. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, again, after the rather minimal violence at the LA ICE protests. We did see the city of Glendale and their contract with ICE. So regardless of what the optics are, the politicians went, oh, wow, okay, this is serious, and ended their contract. Great, we love that.
You're connecting that to violence, but I don't understand the connection.
Yeah, especially when we agree that it's so nonviolent.
Oh, what I mean is it's disruptive, and there was property damage, was there not?
But you're saying that
it was
Waymos.
you're saying there's a causal link there.
I said earlier whether the violence influenced that decision, I don't know, but it certainly didn't stop that decision from being made.
That's a very tenuous connection.
Let her finish.
Well, we don't know. We don't actually know that because, again, in 1968, after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., there was intense violence around the country, and we did see the Fair Housing Rights Act, or what the fuck is it? Let me say, the Fair Housing Act of 1968 was passed. So, again,
you haven't established a link there either. You're just saying a thing happened after another thing, and then
It's true. You ask for causal links for really everything except for your examples.
I mean, do you want me to pull up? Like, I could pull up the articles I had pulled up yesterday.
When I put out that a 99.99% nonviolent protest led to Pasadena disengaging from ICE, you're like, well, you're going to need to show a link because there was a little bit of violence. But the moment that it's your example, then there's no other causality that could be that could be part of that.
All I said was it didn't hurt it. Like, it still happened. And can you argue that?
But the violence is like,
I don't even remember questioning that.
There was like no violence.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. But then you're saying that the optics are insane and everyone thinks that it's burning around the country and then no one's going to vote for the Democratic.
I think that the 20% of extreme conservatives in this country are never going to agree with you or never going to agree with us. And they will think that a Waymo burning is violence and that it's terrible. Okay. But I do think that we've captured a lot of moderates' attention recently, especially with the No Kings protest. I think that we turned a lot of heads. At the protest I was at, which was completely nonviolent, there were no issues at it. There were like 5,000 some protests across the country, and like 10 of them engaged in violence, and even a tiny bit. We turned a lot of moderates' heads yesterday, and that's a big deal to me.
I can give some anecdotal example. My co-host Tali, who did vote for Trump, has told me directly that if more Democrats were like Hutch and condemned violence like Hutch did, that she probably would have been won back and voted for Trump.
So, like, to Staxium's point, like, I don't think that we should be out there every day talking about the violence. Like, it can just be a quick throwaway line. If the violence pops up, you just quick condemnation. But the organization itself, the movement itself, should be explicitly, intentionally, very publicly, verbally nonviolent. And so you just affirm that the movement is that thing by doing that thing. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about the violence a lot because we're on a panel right now, but I don't think that, I don't think that we should be spending 90. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this is weirdly where you and I agree, Hutch. It's like, and this is kind of what I was trying to say before Wick went on his e-girl moment of reading all of his money chats.
But you haven't seen e-girl yet, but go ahead, please.
No, I saw you and Jeb shirtless. It was terrifying and awful.
We won't talk about that. That's a different panel. Keep going. Okay.
Anyways, so, but to Hutch's point, and this is kind of what I was hinting at earlier, is like, when I was younger, I was a much more like vociferously ideological and purist about my left anarchist leanings. I was much more of an idealist. I have, with time, moderated my maybe not my idealism, but become more open to a diversity of strategies and tactics. And to that end, I do think I do think you should talk to moderates. I do think you should be able to have a beer if you're a white dude. If we're like a white presenting dude, you should go talk to your dudes and have like dude time with them. I do think if you're an anarchist or a leftist, you should be running for your, like I said earlier, get on your city council to start affecting actual like strategic change. I do think if you are
how do I say this? If you are very passionate about mobilizing people, you should absolutely be doing that. However, I will also speak to the fact of talking about mobilization. So within my context, when I was in grad school, I was in a union, and there was a major strike for union rights, and it was facilitated by union members at Santa Cruz who decided to go on a wildcat strike because Santa Cruz has one of the most exorbitant costs of living in the state. Wildcat strike mobilized a huge amount of people at numerous campuses to participate for cost of living adjustments and for better wages. However, and this was interesting to observe, I saw conservative friends of mine from STEM fields with really left-wing Marxist friends all in a room together wanting better wages and unified. And then, weirdly, it wasn't the leftists. It was like weird liberal leftist-ish types who were undefined, who brought in defund the police, blah, 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 and it derailed the whole movement of getting better wages. So I do think, like, the point is a diversity of tactics and strategies is good. I'm not a politician. I don't think it's my role to disavow certain political violence. I'm not going to. I would encourage like leftists who are in my circles and stuff to, get more involved with your local county stuff. Try to go talk to your neighbors. Go talk and try to be normal and reasonable. I don't disagree with any of this. Can I
ask Charlie specifically? I want to get her in this. Mm-hmm. Is there a point where you would disavow the violence? Is there a level of violence that would happen let's say the cause is just. You believe in the cause that they're protesting for. Is there any point during that where they could reach a level of a violence where you'd be like, that's too far, I condemn?
I think that harming innocents is always bad. I think that it's a strange question. I do feel like you're trying to question. I feel like it's not a question that I can really answer on here, Rick.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have a question because you said harming innocents.
Yeah.
If a police officer is just standing there, I mean, like Hutch's example was that they were.
The police in LA were not just standing there; they were.
I was there.
Firing rubber bullets into. Wait, I was. No, you were not at the. You were at the No Kings protest. You were not at the other ones.
Okay, fine. New hypothetical then. Okay.
Oh, hold on, stop.
Wait, what? It's just
derailing this. I really want an answer to my question, Charlie.
Sorry.
You can say, I'll give you my answer. As soon as people start beating up innocent people, vandalizing, I disavow. Right? It's easy. If there's no limit,
I would disavow innocents being beaten up. I think is always bad. That's my limit. Is I don't think innocents should ever be harmed under any circumstances. I don't think that you can support it in any way.
I don't want to derail, but I do have a follow-up.
Okay.
Sorry, wait. I'm asking for permission from Wick. I keep
going
over him. Sorry.
Ahead,
okay, so let's say it's a fairly nonviolent rally, okay, and the police are being really chill, and then someone starts engaging in disruptive activity, so much so that the police respond in violent ways, and innocent people get attacked. Now, here's the thing: those police officers should be very clear about who exactly they are responding against, and they do have an onus of responsibility. But do you not also feel that actors, the original bad actors, have some degree of responsibility over their actions?
I mean, yeah, like an agitator is always going to be bad, and typically during protests, you can see people shut those down.
This seems like a wild contradiction.
I agree. It feels like a 180.
So it sounds like you are disavowing that kind of.
You're like one guy going like super crazy and doing insane shit. Like,
so if it's a group of people that endorses the action, I'm lost.
I mean, what is the action? What is?
Okay, let's say there's a group of people and everybody. Let's say there's a group of people. Everybody there is peaceful. Maybe it's a little contentious, but nobody is engaging in any kind of violence. And then 2 or 3 people in the crowd literally throw like a bottle and bricks and stuff like that. Would you say that violence is bad? And the police haven't done any violence yet. They're literally just like they're forming a line.
If they haven't done anything, I would say that that's very stupid. I would say that that's a dumb thing.
Is it bad? Okay, but is it bad violence? Would you say that that's not good? A good use of violence?
I think that it's not productive necessarily. I don't think that that would be productive in that
I don't know how we
scenario.
got her, Hutch.
That's not really what was happening at the LA ICE protests. I mean, police got violent first.
No,
And this is also people are, living under threat of violence.
I mean, Staxiums was talking about it before. Like, you can certainly find in a country this big, and when you have a protest movement this widespread, you can certainly find no shortage of videos of cops that are, in my opinion, very clearly using excessive force. And there's a real problem with accountability with these police departments. I don't think they properly hold their own accountable. There's a culture of protecting each other when this sort of things.
They're trained to escalate.
No, that's not true. Where are you getting that?
They don't have de-escalation tactics they're trained to engage in.
Oh, we certainly.
Now, look, here, I'm critical of the police too.
But is that not like a widespread issue that they are like?
Well, I'll give you a few examples. So, like, I was watching protests. This was before No Kings. It was on Thursday. I was watching protests in Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and some other city that I can't recall. And I shit you not, literally in every single city, I was like switching back and forth between perspectives. And what I saw literally in every single city was entire groups of cops that were actively practicing de-escalation. So, for example, there was a group of kids that were very like agitated, you could tell, and they kept on kicking this metal barrier closer and closer to the cops. And they were kind of like testing what those boundaries are. I think like a lot of people would assume with the narrative online that like every single cop in the country is just going to jump over that barrier and fucking throw the kid on the ground. And that happens sometimes. We can see it. And I think that colors people's perspectives. But in every single instance that I was watching, the cops were just calmly telling them to chill out, scoot back a little bit, and they weren't reacting. And so this idea that cops are never prone to de-escalation or they're not trained in these kinds of things is just wrong. It is true that like a lot of cops fail at this.
No, that was the No Kings protest that was explicitly
this was last Thursday
and was explicitly at Los Angeles.
No, this was last Thursday. Yeah, in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. Those were the 5 cities I was watching, and you could see examples of cops that were literally just standing there. And yes, you could see some examples where the kids were throwing stuff at the cops. Like, would you say that the cops hadn't done any violence yet? I mean, would you say that those kids were engaged in violence in a way that is counterproductive? I think that's what you just said a moment ago. It's not productive, right?
I think it's dumb, but I don't think it's bad. I wouldn't do it.
I failed to see the distinction. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Why is it dumb? I would say it's counterproductive. Do you disagree?
It depends.
Oh.
I think it can be, but
can you give us an example of an incident or a scenario where it would be productive?
No, but we gave her a very specific scenario. So I don't. When she says it can be, it can't be. It's
putting me in a situation where you want me to say what types of violence I think cops should experience, and you are kind of putting me. I can't.
We're not doing.
No, what I'm trying to do.
Openly speak about this, but can we talk about like?
Well, what I'm trying to do is point out that I think your logic is it's kind of incoherent. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Okay. Do I think that children throwing bottles at cops is when they are just standing there? I think that's like, not terribly productive.
I mean, another word for that would be bad, right? Like
yeah, but I think that in situations doing that could be good, but that would.
For instance, if they initiated violence against them, it's like, that's a different story. But we're giving this very specific scenario.
Protecting like ICE agents. Yeah, I think yes, I would say that would be good.
Protecting ICE agents? I don't know what you mean by that.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Have they or have they not the LAPD in the past? Like stopped protesters from disrupting.
Wait, hold on. I have a question. Let's just say an ICE agent. Let's say at the No Kings protest, there was just an ICE agent, and he was just walking through the crowd, and he had. I don't even know what an ICE agent looks like. Genuinely, he's got a badge or something. It says ICE on it. He's just walking through perfectly peacefully. Maybe he's glaring at the crowd a little bit, and he's like, he maybe flips him off a little bit. Someone throws a brick at him. Bad, good, counterproductive, fine. What's your take on that?
Okay, I have to be very careful about how I answer this. Again, if this was an in-person conversation, if this was an in-person conversation, I would tell you my answer straight away. But because of the space, again, I need to be very, very careful.
Don't you think if you do violence,
would I personally be okay with that?
No, we're not asking.
Is that bad or productive? I think that in situations, people who are participating in horrible acts of, violating the human rights of others, let's say like if a Nazi walked through a crowd, a Nazi who, is implicated in the genocide of Jewish people. If someone were to hit that person in the head with a brick, would that be bad?
We're not talking about.
I would say.
We're not talking about Nazis from 1945.
I would also say
Can I just answer his question? I'll just answer.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Rudy, we know your answer, but I want to hear it anyway.
No, but I want to answer it as with a little bit of.
No, sure. Sorry, I'm not trying to shit on it.
So,
yeah.
One, if an ICE agent who knowingly walks through a protest that is in opposition to ICE, let's say it's 99% peaceful, and he antagonizes by flipping off or being weird. Anybody who does shit to him bears responsibility.
I agree. He has respect.
No. Hold on. Let me finish.
Go ahead. Sorry.
You throw something at him. Let's say you throw a bottle at him, or you punch him, or you shove him. Of course, you bear responsibility. However, I think I'm not sympathetic to him because he chose to be in a profession of deporting families, and he's choosing to play stupid games and put himself in a situation where he could get shoved. So
I a little bit agree with you. He has some responsibility for walking into a protest with agitators and knowingly antagonizing them. Yes, sure, he has some responsibility. But does the act, and also can we blame people who feel provoked to see their provoker walk through the crowd? Maybe you could say we can't blame them, but do they have some sort of responsibility? And do we have some responsibility to say, hey, cut it out. Stop fucking doing that because you're making things worse.
I think you misunderstood me. I did just say that if you are the person, let's say some ICE agent walks through, mother punches him. The mother punches him, of course, bears responsibility. He made a choice. He took an action. Of course, he bears responsibility and has to live with the consequences thereof. But this goes back to the larger question of context. I think, let's say no kings. Let's say someone throws a bottle at the cops. I think it's actually on the movement, the people there, who say, time and place, dude, time and place. This is not the time nor the place. Calm him down and either remove him or get out. I think that is totally appropriate.
100%. Great.
I don't even know where we disagree then, because that's the exact.
I'm a little lost because that's my entire point. It's fucking calm this guy down and go, hey, I get it. You got to calm down though.
That's literally what I said. Why did?
No, that's not what you said though.
Charlie, my other point.
Go finish your point, Rudy, please.
My only disagreement, I think, where we would disagree is let's give the example of. I'll go back to Europe. I lived near a train station in Europe. And there was a far-right movement, and they were peacefully protesting. Of course, there was peaceful protesters, but then Europe has the long history of black, stronger and more organized here. I think totally fine to go stampeding and throwing things at the fascists. I have no issue with it. They were throwing things at the fascists. They were throwing things at the cops. Totally fine with it. But it was an organized front, and everyone in the Black Bloc protest was there together in agreement with their tactics. And I think that's fine. I think if you have a Black Bloc motherfucker at a No Kings protest where there's let's say Staxiums, you have an agitator at your protest that you went to with your kids, you would be completely warranted to be like, dude, what the hell? Of course you're warranted. However, if you brought your kids to a Black Bloc protest, I think they'd be like, dude, what the hell?
Yeah,
and have every right to tell you not to be there.
Yeah,
obviously. But wait, so I have a question.
I literally was just saying that shit. I was just saying the same thing, and you guys were like, "Oh."
No, but you just but you were given an opportunity. No, but
I said it depends on the situation. I said
hold on, but we gave.
No, I literally feel like that. Like, Jesus
hold on, Hutch
Christ.
can respond. Hutch can respond, please.
The reason why it's not what you say it is because we gave you a very specific hypothetical, and you use words like not productive and I can't remember what else you said, but you just wouldn't come out and say that that kind of violence is bad. I think you're demonstrating a hesitance to condemn that kind of violence because I think you're focused on the larger issue, which again, I think people should do that. Like if people are doing sort of undisciplined, unfocused violence, if it's just an expression of rage, they're looking for that catharsis. You should look at like the conditions that have arisen to create that anger. And I think you're right to focus on that. But I think where you fall a little bit short is I feel like you're kind of tacitly condoning a kind of violence that is totally undisciplined. It's totally unfocused. It serves no purpose. And that's where I think the issue is here.
Stop seconds. Gotta let her respond to that. Go ahead.
All right. Well, again, my feelings are that it is unproductive. But again, because of the source of the anger and because of the situation, I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad. Just stupid.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
I just don't get this distinction. If it's stupid, we should tell them to stop it. Right?
I mean, yeah, and you should get them to stop it. But do I think that it was
then we agree.
necessarily...
Could you tell Wick's audience if they want to engage in violence at a protest, they should stop that? They should not do that?
It would
And your
depend on the
audience as well.
situation.
Unfocused violence. We're talking about like unfocused, just like unprovoked
Violence.
Well,
yeah, I'd say that's
that's
like,
not
no, don't do
self-defense.
it. Don't do it.
Okay. Panel's over.
Like, I still don't know where we're disagreeing.
My job is done here.
This
Me
is
and my
why
Hitler mustache.
This is partially
Okay.
This is partially my fault because I perhaps we should have done this on another platform than Twitch, because I feel like we're saying things that just not to get in trouble rather than what we actually think. That's what I think's happening. I think we're all saying things not to get in trouble, and okay, I get it, I understand, but it really makes it hard to talk about. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a skill issue. Just don't have opinions that get you in trouble.
Other than me, because apparently I'll bite every bullet.
True.
I just think like just broad,
I
but
would
like
say that I do not morally disagree with. I think that people who take jobs that put them in a position where they get to hurt lots of people, if those people get hurt, I go,
I feel like that's a different conversation, though, right?
You put yourself in that position. I don't really care too much if you are harmed. Like, I wouldn't harm you, but again, I'm not going to cry over it. I'm going to be like,
the firebomb a Walmart tweet all over again. Like, I don't get your distinction between, like, sure, if you don't want to have sympathy for an ICE agent who got attacked at a rally, fine. I'm not here to push you on that, okay? But like, we are talking about protesters engaging in some form of violence. And what about property destruction, right? Doesn't that also... Yeah, go ahead, Rudy.
It's also contextual.
We're talking hypotheticals. I'm going to bring an actual real example that we can talk about because it is a real world one and it is not bad. So has anyone here on this panel heard of a guy named Eric King?
Let's say that one more time, please. The last name.
Has anyone heard of the name Eric King?
I did, because I watched a bunch of videos of that. Now I look smart. He was like was this a civil rights person or someone who analyzed the civil rights?
So Eric King, he was related to, in the 2020 stuff, this guy Eric King was released from Supermax prison after
never mind.
10 years there.
I was wrong.
No, so Eric King was released. He's an anarchist from St. Louis. He was arrested and charged with, I think, terrorism, even though for throwing a Molotov cocktail at a police precinct in St. Louis after Ferguson. He did this intentionally when there was no one in the building. He intentionally targeted it when nobody could be harmed, no physical harm, nor no bodily harm to an individual could have happened, and he was charged with terrorism. I am just curious, or I'm not as interested in Charlie's answer because I think I know what Charlie's answer will be generally, but I am curious. How do I say this? Is there a place for such tactics if nobody is physically harmed? And this is targeted primarily to Staxian and Hutch. You might not like the tactics, you might find them ineffective, but is there a place in this movement?
Well, what did that
your movement?
Well, what did that accomplish besides this guy going to prison?
It has accomplished a lot of attention or increasing attention to this cause and to the political imprisonment of him and being overcharged by the state.
That's circular though. That doesn't make any sense. You're saying like
Right. The attention.
the reason why it's good is because now people are defending him. I'm not sure what that.
You need to defend him if he didn't do the thing.
So let me back up and maybe take a step back actually and say that, try to contextualize this. So for me, this goes back to Staxium's. I'm grateful you asked the question earlier about outcomes and intent.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I am less. I think I am fundamentally less interested. I'm not disinterested, but I am less interested in the measurable outcomes that you guys are. And I do, and this is why I support a diversity of tactics. For one, I'll do like a tame or nonviolent example for this. And I don't want to derail into voting and its efficacy, but I think we all agree we don't want more Republicans maybe in office. We agree that the outcome of the last election was dog shit and bad. I did not vote in the last election. I live in California. I don't think me voting in California, my individual vote, would have statistically done anything, nor do I think me not voting actually harmed anything. However, I'll try to bring this to my point. I think for me, I am more interested in, I think I'm losing my thread. Fuck, my brain is an absolute shit show, sorry. I guess my point is I'm not as interested in outcomes in the same way you guys are, and I'm also more interested in wondering if there are situations in which nonviolence is ineffective in the way that you guys are saying.
So
I guess that's my larger question.
Yeah, what you're asking, just for my edification, is you're saying that you value process over results, and you think that the process is more important, and the process that you are part of the process you're advocating for is violence is sometimes part of that process. Is that generally what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Thank you, Wick. And I think it's conditional. I don't think you can, and I don't think, and this is where maybe I disagree with Charlie, is I don't actually think you can ahead of time decide when violence may become necessary. I think that is in the moment, this might be necessary. This might be a necessary decision. Go for it. And I'm not going to say no to that.
Right, but I don't have to condemn I'm sure that there are instances during a protest where it might be correct to engage violently. That might be correct. I know almost for a certainty that did not happen during the No Kings riots.
Yeah,
maybe in 5 years, if Donald Trump goes for a third, he's elected a third time somehow, and whatever, ICE becomes.
I hope we do something.
Yeah, no, sure. I'm saying, not right now. Not right now.
Wait,
right now. Because obviously we all agree that there are times where violence is necessary, and there might be a time where violence might be necessary. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Sure. So I would say no. But also, I have a quick question. Sorry, you said you don't engage you didn't vote last year, but also you said to engage locally. Like, does your city not also vote for a sheriff? Does it not?
So this is where that's a good question. Thank you. No, actually, I do think voting locally in your local elections is a useful and fantastic tool. I do not think voting federally is that effective outside of
in California. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, in California, it's.
Hutch, wasn't making a huge noble claim there, Staxiums. Don't worry.
Sure.
Well, I just got curious because Charlie, you were talking about you would hope that like some big action, massive protest movement, potential violent clash would happen if Donald Trump tried to usurp power and just circumvent the election. Can I ask you a personal question? Did you vote in 2024? I'm just curious.
So I actually didn't. I voted every year before, and I didn't not vote because of an ideological thing. I moved states. And when I moved states, I moved right when the deadline for registering to vote was. I moved from Oregon to California.
But you would have voted.
So unfortunately, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I was just curious.
Okay. Well, I think we've kind of hit an impasse a little bit simply because of the nature of the topic, which is unfortunate, but I understand people's reticence to kind of go real into these things. So I have a couple options at this point. We could open it up, or we could just kind of end it. What do you guys think?
I'm down to open it up.
I know Lycan wanted on.
Yeah, I'm down too. That's fine.
Hell yeah.
Hey, Lycan, if you're still in chat and you want to come in, or if you have big thoughts or you've been looking at this and you've been thinking, hey, Wick, why don't you ask them this? Why don't you ask them that? Jump in the Discord. Yeah, jump backstage and I'll throw you in.
I feel like we all kind of largely agree for the most part.
I don't think you do, but I don't think we can really push in onto that because
I think it's close enough. Close enough.
I disagree. I want to fight you on this, Charlie. I do, but I'm moderating.
Okay.
I don't. I don't think so at all. In fact, I think we are at a huge gap in this conversation.
Also, I do think that Wick and Staxiums, or not Wick, Staxiums and
Hutch
and I disagree fundamentally on this in a lot of ways. However, I am grateful that we were able to have a normal kind of calm-ish conversation and just chat, and I would absolutely continue having. If we were in person, I would happily have this conversation and be a lot more transparent. I'm not streaming. For the folks who are, I do not want to get them in trouble because this is their livelihood. So I'm also trying to be
I will say
respectful.
this.
Appreciate that.
I will say this. I have the only thing and we've had people say all sorts of crazy shit. The only thing I've ever been banned for is I called some, like, there were incels on my panel, and I used the term incel to describe them, and they banned me for that. But we've talked
Wick, I have haters. Wick, I have haters.
What?
I have haters. I have haters, Wick.
If you don't think I have haters, then fair enough. But I understand.
Yeah.
Give me one moment, please. Liking your live, sir. You have some thoughts here. Go ahead.
Yeah. How we doing, folks?
What up, buddy?
how's it going?
Long time no speak. Hutch, how you been? You cooking anything good?
Not really. Been lazy lately.
I feel you, man.
Yeah.
I fucking feel you. Let me turn my cam on. Hey, folks. All right. So, what is the most important thing going on right now when it comes to the LA protests? What are they protesting?
It's ICE, but it's a bigger issue of Donald Trump being an authoritarian and the potential threat that he poses to the entire republic. Yeah.
Exactly. And he is, like, every 4 years, it's the soul of the nation, right? But I think for the first time in any of our lifetimes, this is the time where we get to say, no, shit's fucking real, right? So, to all that, and I think we're all in agreement here on this panel, I say, if you had 10 seconds to talk to the world about this issue, would you bring up those riots at all?
No, not in the case of, no. I don't think
one of the reasons that the Republicans win, the reason they got away with January 6th and all this other shit, is because they don't do what we do, which is eat our own in these times of crisis. So where you have these people protesting and then the rioters happen, everyone's first words or second words, or there's a big little preamble and then a but, and then it's about the rioters, that gives the centrists, the fence sitters, everyone else the permission they need to ignore everything else. And it signals to the base, like, hey, I thought, like, Trump was the shit, man. Like, he was the real deal, like, fascist motherfucker. And now it's like, well, I mean, if we're going to talk about these people fucking throwing rocks and burning cars, is he really that bad? Instead of, like, a confronting message that is completely aligned, and people say that it tears us apart and all this other shit, it's really the leaders, the thought leaders who actually are going out there that give any real serious time to it other than saying violence is bad. The end. Or when someone says, yeah, but what about the rioters? I don't care. Trump's a fucking fascist trying to, rip people out of their homes. Like, that is the most important.
I 100% agree. And that's why I started my thing with saying,
up to a point.
If I were talking to a conservative, I would go, you, let's focus on Trump. He is a fascist and he's taking over America. He is detaining children without due process. And we are largely peaceful. You could shut the fuck up about a couple Waymos being burnt. However, if I'm talking to you guys who are all in agreements anyway, why are we burning Waymos to begin with? That seems like a stupid thing to do.
Like, I'd say I would normally be like, well, we're here amongst friends and all that other stuff, so we can have those conversations. But no, it trickles up and down, man. Like, our politicians go out there and they feel the need to say this stuff. So instead of having that focused message, just saying, like, again, Republicans, they don't give a shit about January 6th. There was like 2 months of like, oops, oh, that was kind of crazy. And now it's like, oh, you fucking spoke against Trump during those 2 months? Fuck you, you're done, you're out, you're getting primaried, fuck you. It's an aligned front and they don't acknowledge it. Look at the shit that just happened. What's the assassinations the other day, and the press conference with with Kristi Noem? They immediately went to like, no, fuck him. He was disrespectful, which is insane to say that justifies what they did to him, but that's what they do, and it makes them win. So instead of us focusing on these rioters, when you get my point.
No, Rudy, just let me get in here. You're exactly wrong, Lycan. The response to the assassinations, response to of MAGA towards January 6th, the response of MAGA towards the Kristi Noem and the Padilla incidents, these are things that are albatrosses around their neck. They won once. They won in 2024. They lost in 2020. They lost in 2022. They're going to lose in 2026. You're using one example.
You don't know that. They win every day. That they continue forward. They continue to do this shit, and they got look.
No, wait.
People.
They've been
on every issue now.
More importantly, though, they've been getting stomped out in special elections, like absolutely. Mogged in special elections right now.
If that continues to happen, great. But when we talk about the end of 2020. One of the big reasons that all that, the riots and all that shit, again, what was the study that came out? Like 98% or something of all protesting across that summer was peaceful, and everyone's still focused on that only 2%. We let them focus on it. I say that as me being part of the problem, who was always talking about that. No, you can't say who won that election, because earlier in this debate, it was brought up that, yeah, we won, but it still had a huge impact.
So here,
didn't because of that.
I think the reason why these conversations have happened, Lycan, is because of proximity. Like, I would assume probably most of us spend way more time talking to people kind of just broadly on the left than we do MAGA. Like, I do have conversations with MAGA people, but 95% of my interactions are with people that are politically aligned with me or well to my left. And I think what the issue is here, and I feel like Wick, you're really going to agree with me here. I feel like the issue is that in online spaces, the sort of progressive, sort of like leftist wing, they have an enormous, like, outsized voice. And I see it all too often in those circles where it's not just about like not talking about the issue. We're talking about people that are just straight up glorifying the violence and saying that it's good. And so I think that's why
my Twitter feed probably looks exactly like yours. And I see more often than not people that just are like, don't fucking care. And I'm not seeing people saying, hell yeah, burn the fucking Waymos. I see memes and all that stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's some pretty funny memes about the fucking Waymos. But other than that, I'm not seeing anyone saying, yes, we need more of this. I have not seen it.
Like, your prescription is to not care about
I'm not saying don't violence. I'm not saying don't care. I'm saying don't
stop talking about it. Don't give it the airwaves.
Don't give it the air. Like when, now granted, I'm going to bring this guy up, and I assume that most of us to some degree have an issue with him, but maybe not. I don't know. Fetterman, like when he goes out and he says X, Y, and Z, all the right stuff about Trump, and I'm like, and then he says but, and then gives another paragraph about in the riots or the violence, the burning things down. And it's like, I'm sorry, you just said the guy basically Hitler, and then you said, but yeah, some cars were set on fire. I'm sorry, one of these is way more important than the other.
Fetterman,
I agree with you.
Hold on, just real quick. Last I checked, I'm looking up current polls, but Fetterman's pretty insanely bipartisanly popular because he does that. In Pennsylvania, a must-win state for anyone who wants to win the presidency, right? So the reason he does this isn't just because of nothing. He does this because he thinks, and I tend to agree, that calling in policing your own tends to work. If you want to build a coalition where you get more moderates to actually show up, then that's what you do. Now, I think Fetterman goes too far with it on occasion, and I'm like, that's dumb,
yeah,
right? But he's just, again, I'm trying to get a more a recent poll, but yeah, he's pretty insanely.
Wait, let me ask you a question real quick. Is it ever appropriate to say that the rioting is bad? Is there ever a time? Because you seem to be taking this position that there's this much larger issue, and I agree with you that it is a much larger issue, but you're sort of using that as the justification or some kind of a rationale that you should never condemn. You should never condemn the violence.
I think you never condemn it. I'm saying that if you go look at the Twitter feeds of anyone, if you go look at the op-eds of the New York Times, you go look at the hit by hit on CNN, I think that if it isn't this compared to fucking this, and this is the riot stuff, and this is everything else. If it's not like that, then I have a problem. So when the governor goes on to make his statement and he says, if he wants to say, hey, violence will not be tolerated, X, Y, and Z, but the vast fucking majority, not 50-50, not 1/3, is about the riots, I'm fine with that. If it's, hey, violence is bad, don't do it, you will be held accountable. Like, if he wants to throw that at the fucking end, cool. But the main crux, or in the middle maybe, sandwich it in there.
But I feel like you've just laid out. Let me make one point real quick, and I promise, and then you can jump. Like, I feel like you just laid out the perfect reasoning for why it is beneficial to say that violence is bad, because we all know that the like.
Are you on the right mic?
Am I?
I think you're on your webcam mic.
It sounds like.
Sorry.
So
Go ahead.
So because we know that the media is going to focus on the more salacious stuff, the more violent stuff, because we know that they're going to use that in it, and whether or not it's intentional, I think they're just chasing ratings. I don't think it's ideologically driven. But we know that this is going to, if you get massive media coverage of, let's say, a protest that was 99% peaceful, but then there's tear gas or whatever, and we know that event is going to dominate the discussion rather than the peaceful protests, that's the very reason why we should be discouraging that kind of violence and encouraging non-violence.
But I think it detracts from the narrative that we need to stick to.
Better.
Thank you. I think it detracts from the narrative. I think that we spend so much time having, like, if I look at the conversations the last week, my feed was more of this conversation than anything else. It completely deviated away from the core issue, which is, again, and trust me, like, I've been accused over the last 2 years with this Israel-Palestine shit of being a leftist. Like, it brings me no joy to come out here and say fascist, because back 8 years ago I was criticizing people who were like fascism, Nazis, but goddamn dude, we're right there. And so I have no breath for the riots and the violence. I have nothing until they start coming. You asked that question earlier. Yeah, when some leftist comes into the crowd and starts murking MAGA dudes, that is the day that I will be like, we need to talk about this. But that ain't happening. They're burning some cars, they're throwing some rocks. Like, I watched a dude point blank with the non-lethal because the dude threw an empty plastic water bottle at him, and it was completely a petty fucking act because he fucking whacks him with the bottle, and the guy goes, all right, you're gonna get it. The guy wasn't a threat, there wasn't an angry crowd around, he was just a fucking dick. That is the kind of shit where I'm like, I really don't care that he threw the bottle at the cop. Should you throw bottles at cops? No. Do I have to say that? Why he shouldn't have fucking do it. In that moment, the worst person was the fucking cop who point blank with the non-lethal. That was the worst person in that moment.
Yeah, but it depends on who we're talking to, and that's kind of been my point of the conversation. If I'm talking to that guy who's chucking a water bottle, I'm like, don't be an idiot. Don't throw the water bottle. Now, I wouldn't talk to him and go like, yeah, well, the cop shouldn't go ahead and harass you. So actually, it's fine that you're doing it. I'm talking to the guy who's chucking the water bottle, and if I'm talking to the people who are burning the Waymos, I would say, don't do that. You're being stupid.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the national conversation. I'm talking about
I'm talking to them. That's my point. Is I'm not having a national conversation in front of a podium in front of all my constituents. I'm talking to some radical leftists who think that burning Waymos is kind of chill.
Sure, but when you do that, I don't know how big your Twitter presence is, right? But when I'm looking at like the figureheads in this space, right, or I'm looking at the pundits, I'm looking at what's his name. I'm looking at Cuomo, or I'm looking at Morgan, or all these other people that have big accounts. It's when they are out there talking about this shit. And instead of, again, like, don't care, they're protesting against the fascists. That's the more important thing. That's where it's like, we can agree, yeah, one-on-one, we'll have those conversations. But the big people at the top, at our level, at the media level, at the national level, it's when those people are focusing on anything else but Trump that I have an issue. And the gentleman on my screen who's above me, I'd like to let him speak because he has been trying for a minute.
Well, I wanted to give you a chance. And Tali, if you can unmute and you have things to say, feel free to jump in. But Rudy, the mic is yours, sir.
Well, kind of just jumping off what Staxium says, it's about who you're talking to. And I guess I said this earlier, and this is why for me it's hesitant in general to disavow certain types of protests because I do not live in those communities that were targeted during the ICE raids. I am not affected. I am not from there, and I am not going to be targeted by an ICE raid, nor is almost anyone in my immediate circle. It feels condescending and patronizing I don't have a platform, to be clear, but if I did, it would feel condescending and patronizing to tell
people who are severely affected seeing their family members being pulled off the streets at work or being chased in the streets at work by ICE agents, that, hey, chill out, bro. Hey, man, chill out. We can have that conversation after the fact you can have those community conversations. It is condescending and patronizing for me be like, hey, I object to this.
But you're implying,
I want to add on to that just before anyone says anything to him, because I heard something earlier in this conversation. I want to make sure it doesn't go that way. I don't think that the people that are causing the violence in the LA protests have a different objective and are just there to cause revolution. I think those people are also there because of the ICE shit going on, because of Trump's policies.
But you guys are implying that the people that are taking it to the escalation of like violence, you guys are implying that they like represent their community. We're talking about a tiny fraction of most 99.99999% of these people that live in these communities are not prone to this kind of violence. And I guarantee you that most of the people that live even in Los Angeles disapprove of like looting and setting cars on fire. And you guys are saying like, well, it's condescending. It's condescending for us to say that you shouldn't protest that way, but that the whole premise is flawed to begin with.
Yeah, I want to give it to Tali. Tali, go ahead.
It's just incredibly cringe to do this whole like, as a white man, I'm not going to condemn the emotional actions of these poor besieged brown people. Like, actually, there are a lot of brown people and immigrants, both documented and undocumented, who do not want to see violence in their streets.
Yes.
That makes their communities more dangerous. That brings more law enforcement into their communities.
Yes.
Lots of them do not want to see this. I would like to see
so understanding why people would be upset is yes, obviously no one thinks that like all Latinos and immigrants have the same views and are a monolith, but I think it is very reasonable to say you can understand why people would be scared and angry.
It's not just about white people being upset.
Angry. Being scared and angry.
Have expressed that.
Being scared and angry is not an excuse for setting cars on fire or throwing bricks at people. It's simply not.
Wait, hold on.
Let me do
Okay, we got 5 people. Let Charlie finish. Let Charlie finish her point. She's been trying to finish, and then we're gonna give it to Lycan, then Staxiums, and then Tali can respond. Go ahead.
My point is that you can understand their anger, and frankly, I can't excuse it. I can't excuse it. I can't excuse actions like those.
You just said earlier that it wasn't productive, though.
And I think it's.
You just said earlier that it wasn't productive to throw a brick at a cop.
You brought up a hypothetical of a random person. You said if there was a line of cops standing there doing nothing and someone threw a brick at them.
That's the violence we're talking about, though.
No, it is.
Yes, it is. Yes, of course it is. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about unprovoked
Violence
first. Holy mother of God.
Yeah, Charlie, finish your point, and then they can respond. Go ahead.
My issue is that I think that it is excusable when people feel like they are not being listened to, when very little is being done to protect them, when they feel that their lives and the lives of their family and their communities are in danger. I do think that, yes, and I think that, again, at the very least, we've shown that the extremely minimal violence, again, was not a deterrent in anything getting done because, again, Glendale ended their contract with ICE. So at the very least, throwing the guy who threw bricks at a cop car and people burning Waymos were not a deterrent.
So these people,
action being taken.
These people, a lot of them are, ethnically or, historically sharing some background with those that are being targeted. And so, it is being felt through the Latino community, seeing this happen.
What evidence do you have for this?
The fucking demographic of Los Angeles? What do you mean? Why are you pushing back on that? Stop. The point I'm trying to go.
You were talking about Los Angeles, not the protests?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. I don't have demographic statistics, right? Okay, I'm sorry. But maybe we can go a little human on this one and say, hey, you know what? The Latino community is hugely impactful. The significant number of undocumented immigrants that live there make that community support that community in so many ways. So we can just say, hey, yeah, they have a communal connection to these people, okay? So we don't have to go down the ethnic background of everyone. The point is that LA is going to feel when the immigrants are being targeted. Now, we can also get on the line of, yeah, but they're going after undocumented. And I can say, yeah, well, you know what? The documented ones, this still creates hate for them. But that is not the point that I'm going towards. The point I'm going towards is, okay, cool. So we've reached the point now, and this is for Hutch, for Stacks, for Wick. We have reached, and for Talia, we have now reached the point where they are going after Americans. Red-blooded, born and bred, white as Americans. We have reached the point. It's a year later. I want to ask you if the exact same level of violence that's going on right now is happening as they are taking off out Americans and forcefully deporting them for freedom of speech, for being members of the press, for whatever reason. They are Americans, true blue Americans.
Of course.
You're talking about
violence that's happening right now, okay? And yes, it's a hypothetical, and I'm asking you to engage with it. If that is happening, are you cool with the violence at the level that it's happening right now? Are you cool with that?
It is always contextual. Like, what is the point of the violence? What would the violence accomplish? These are the most relevant questions to ask.
I'll say that. What if it's just anger
then you should care about that. You should care about that kind of violence if you want your movement to be successful. Like, I philosophically I principally believe that if the movement, whatever protest movement that arises, is nonviolent, it has a higher chance of succeeding. And so to that end, you should care about people taking actions that could reflect poorly on the rest of the group and undermine the goal. Like, if your goal is just the expression of anger, no, I don't think that that's a good enough excuse. I'm sorry.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Go ahead, Rudy. And then I know Staxians wants in too. And yeah, go ahead.
So I guess going to something like an observed earlier, and I'm not going to harp on it, but as someone who has spent way more time in really right-wing circles researching and learning and trying to understand them because I felt it was important to do so because I grew up in those circles. There is this mantra of no enemies to the right. And to your point, Hutch, calling out people in your own circle is important. However, it only works if there is anything resembling a remotely unified front. And I am grateful for this panel because I, for one, I enjoy talking to Staxian and Hutch. It's been great chatting with you because I've gotten to have a better sense of where people who generally agree with me are in terms of tactical considerations. That's a cool conversation to me. I think people on my end need to have more of those conversations. To be honest, though, I don't think the rhetoric of constantly. I guess maybe let me put it this way. I think the rhetoric should be a tactical one, and this goes to I think, Hutch, you had a great way of framing this at the start of this whole debate, which is talking about the violence is kind of secondary to talking about the larger tactics and the larger goals and the aims. I think I agree with that completely. I think we all agree that it's a minority contingent of people who are engaged in violence generally. So I guess for me, it's I think the left should adopt a more approach of the right of no enemies to the left. You should not be infighting in the same level. You should be strategic and adopt the people you need to adopt.
I don't want to become MAGA. I don't want to be there. Why would I?
Can I jump in? We'll keep
Sister Soldier Wick.
I'm not. I'm saving it. It's in the chamber. Don't worry, right? But go ahead.
I did.
What is your name? Visual Decay. Something with an R.
Rudy. His name's Rudy. Go ahead.
Rudy. Okay, Rudy. With all due respect, you are emblematic of the ununited front of the Democratic Party of the left. It is partially true that the right, they act together more when it comes down to voting. Okay, you said that you didn't vote in the 2024 election, right? So the problem on the left is that you have all these different divisions. The leftists among the Democratic Party or the left wing of America don't vote for Democrats. They don't actually support the party. They insist that their needs must be met and that their priorities must be top priority for the party, but they don't vote for them if they don't get exactly what they want. There are many different factions on the right, and they've been warring with each other more and more, which is something that I commend because it's getting really ugly on the right. But yes, they all get together and vote for the same candidate because they believe, even the ones who didn't like Donald Trump, that he was going to be better for their priorities than Kamala Harris. Yet a tremendous amount of people on the left refuse to do that for Kamala Harris to prevent Trump. So it's a little bit ironic that there's a bunch of people out protesting that they need to do violence in the streets to stop Trump, but they wouldn't vote against him in 2024. This is a real problem that the left is happening.
So
and just that the left is
Wait,
having.
so you wanted to talk about percentages? Like, what percentage of the people out there are violent and doing violence?
Hold on. Can you? So Tali addressed me, so I'll just try to keep it brief.
Sorry, yeah.
I guess first, so just full disclosure, I have no shame in admitting I've only voted once in my life. I don't ever intend to vote. I don't find it effective. However, this is not me telling other people not to vote. I said this repeatedly throughout the
All Democrats should immediately stop listening to anyone who says, I don't vote and I never intend to vote.
Rudy
It's like,
isn't a
why
Democrat.
should you even...
Rudy's political views are actually significant, rather complex.
Sure, but right now, why should any political movement listen to someone who says that they don't vote and they never will?
Okay,
Why would
well,
someone
are you going to let
listen to
Rudy
someone
talk?
who just immediately fucking
He's been
says that when
talking.
you don't even know the person?
Yeah, you just let...
No, she was able to come to that conclusion. There was a.
Well, let's give it to Hutch. Let's give it to Hutch. Hutch, please.
She was touching on a crucial point. Like, what should we spend time trying to persuade people that announce their intention to just not meaningfully engage in the electoral process?
No,
Like,
persuade them? No, but she
possible
said that
value?
he can say nothing meaningful or valuable about the situation. She undermined him.
It's clear he's uninterested in the electoral process.
He can say whatever he wants. No one involved in politics should listen to him because he's not voting for them.
Thankfully, Tali, nobody does listen to me. So blessedly, you're lucky.
I listen to all of you. Okay, everyone equally gets listened to.
Can I just finish this point?
Rudy, finish your point, please.
You seem to have latched onto that thing where I am just being transparent, and then I said I would not encourage everybody to just follow my suit. I reached this conclusion for my own personal reasons and with my own conscience. However, I have said this repeatedly throughout the debate, and I think it's ironic that I have been the most pro-violence in this debate, and yet I have gotten less attention than everybody else. I've said this repeatedly. I do think people on my quadrant on the left should get involved. I do think voting in local elections is very useful and good. I think a diversity of tactics is a good thing. I have even said voting in a local election for me would be ethically and statistically, tactically useful. I am very pragmatic about a lot of these things at the end of the day. I just happen to think that because it's kind of just funny that you think I'm like advocating everyone get on my board. I feel like I've been...
No, I never said that. Well, I said that politicians should not be pining after the political priorities of people who expressly will not vote for them.
Can I give an example, perhaps, and then I want to get other people in here. So Mike from PA, we all know him, right, or know of him at least, famously during the last election said, unless Kamala chooses not, I think it was Tim Walz, I think he wanted specifically, it might have been
it was Tim
anyone
Walz.
but Shapiro, then if she doesn't do this, I won't vote for her. And so I don't think this was why she did it, but she ended up picking the candidate he wanted.
No, it was because of Mike from PA's tweet that came out later.
Vote for her. Like, he still did not vote for her. So even though she did the thing that he said that he wanted, she did not get the vote. So the question becomes, why would we ever care what they want again? Why would we ever care what a leftist wants?
Because we're not talking about what he wants. We're talking about whether or not he can actually say something that is valid to the political ecosystem. And those are two different things. So if you could say...
I don't know how this started to get on voting or anything.
Did I bring it back? I've been in the chamber for a bit.
Voting versus violence is probably
let's stack him. Let him be violent for once.
Thank you. All right. So here, I'm going to say a couple things. First off, I really hate Rudy and Charlie's motivation sometimes and rhetoric about like how condescending it is that I want to talk to people who like how dare I talk to family members who are being harassed by ICE agents. I've said this and I'll say this again. I have family members who are being harassed by ICE agents, and it is extremely real for me. It is extremely important to me, and I need that to be clear that I'm very interested in that. But when we talk about understanding their anger, I'm not asking them to chill out. I'm not asking them to not care. I'm not asking them to be calmer. I'm saying use your anger in a little bit more productive ways than what I'm seeing right now. And I'm also really interested in a united front. And when 99% of the protesters are like, hey, we're coming out, we're going to be peaceful, we're going to have peaceful protests, that's at the name and all. Every time you look at the website, it says No Kings, peaceful, family friendly. And I see someone coming in with the fucking brick. Yeah, I'm like, get on the rest of our page. Be the united front with us. Because we are trying to be together in one community and be together. And the fact that you aren't is so damning to you. So I need to talk to you and say, get with the page, bro, lock in.
Weirdly, so again, Staxiums, to your point, and my larger point about not condemning in the context of ICE is I live in Orange County. I don't feel, this is not because they're brown, the poor brown people kind of thing primarily. It's primarily, I don't live in LA. I don't feel it is my right as someone who is not in a community to intervene on those conversations. I think that is condescending and weird. I think it's similar, like I'm in the queer community. I don't care if someone has an opinion of me, wants to talk about it, but I'm also going to be a little more hesitant to listen if you're not in this space and having a vested interest. And it's not because of that identity only. It's because, are you local? Are you in this space? Like, I have family in Germany. I'm half German.
Okay, so with this,
hold on. Okay, if we're going to keep, I'm getting to Staxium's point, and the last point I'll make is this, Staxiums. I agree with you that, where's I going with this? With the United Front thing, this is why I've said this repeatedly. I have not disavowed the No Kings protest. I think it's a cool protest, and it was incredible to see. And I've never once in this debate, to be clear, just speaking for myself, disavowed it. I've never said it was bad. I actually think it was dope. I just hope that momentum continues. I said that earlier. And so for me, it's like, again, going back to my original point, I'm not disavowing any of these tactics. I have not once. So again, we're on, like, 3 of you are streaming and it's your livelihood or whatever. So I'm trying not to say anything that gets you guys jeopardized.
I just want to know, like, so would this hold if it were a community who had views that you disagreed with? Would you still feel like cringe and it would be unfair for you to opine on their tactics? If there was a super conservative...
You aren't MAGA, you're not Republican, you're not part of their group. Why are you criticizing
Let's even take it more locally, because those people came from across the country to violate our capital. Let's say there's a community somewhere in... I don't want to start degrading some southern town now, but, you know, the whatever the cliche that you can think of, the biggest cliche that you can think of, if they were all really frustrated by the same-sex marriage policies that are allowed to happen in their state, and they really think this should be a states' rights issue, and this is because it's what's said in the Bible, and so they go out there and they decide that they want to burn crosses on all of the gay people's lawns. Is that something that you shouldn't really opine on because it's a community that has cultural differences from you and you're not from that community, so it wouldn't be right for me to intervene?
Right.
I think when leftists do that,
one is violence against
exactly. You only you approve of the violence when it's your political view.
You're going to try to reduce it down to something like, it's like, well, it's okay for our side, but not for theirs. It's like, no, I don't care about it on this side because ultimately we're all protesting against fucking ICE and shit.
Because you don't agree with the cause.
Those are because you're harassing civilians. We're talking about violence against the state, not civilians, not random gay people.
I'm sorry, burning taxis. Burning taxis.
They're Waymos. They're Waymos. Do you know what Waymos are? Yes, they are. They're fucking Google robot cars, and they sell footage to the police. Like, yes, it's
not about civilians, and civilians pay taxes to the police. So really engaging in violence against civilians because civilians pay taxes is actually harming the police. No, you don't see the connection?
Can I just answer
that? The point is, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't, Staxiums, I can't honor that. I'm sorry. Okay. I can't honor that. This is
a consistent problem. As someone who's a former Democrat who is winnable back, who is really not pleased with what I see as the fascistic movement starting on the right, that I don't really see Trump as the head of. I see these as people more so surrounding him. As someone who is very winnable back, a big thing that turns me off from the left was the fact that they would not call out the bad apples, that they would allow for horrendous things.
Well, you also don't like transgender people or abortion, right, Tali?
What do you mean? I don't like transgender people, Charlie. You're really off.
I thought that was the thing. Like I thought last time we had a conversation, you had some strong feelings about trans people.
Can I just say what I said?
I thought that was like a.
Hold on. Everyone, Holly,
so you
stop,
can take it up with them.
please. I'm throwing a flag on the play. This is not going to turn into a transgender debate. We are not doing that today.
No. I know, but I'm sorry. Like I thought that Tali was very like socially conservative, and that was the.
No, I'm literally not. I'm literally a lesbian. My wife is a detransitioner. I have lots of trans friends. I'm not socially conservative. I'm a disaffected liberal. I hate the bullshit of the leftists. I hate it.
Okay.
It's not good for the left. And this is, I think, another problem with like what we're seeing right now. And yes, the violence is a minority. I completely agree. But people get the footage and they put it out there, and it riles the right wing up. And it's like people believe that they can. The normies hate this. Normies hate this, and you have to win back normies. It's like people are denying the fact that Trump won in 2024. There were a lot of people who didn't care enough to turn out and vote left because they were disaffected in some type of way. If you want to get those people back, you can't do this shit. You can't be burning cars in the middle of the street and throwing bricks at police officers.
Okay, let me
help the cause.
So Lycan is speaking to a misalignment of priorities, and correct me, like I don't want to mischaracterize what you're saying, but you're upset about the misalignment of priorities. You're upset that maybe a lot of people, and especially a lot of normies, don't see the larger problem and instead focus on what you view to be minute in comparison. Would you say that that's accurate? Lycan?
Are you talking to Lycan or me?
Yeah, I was talking to Lycan.
I mean, yeah, no, that is what I'm saying. And I will say that, this is a prime example, like someone who, Tali, you see what's going on, you see what Trump is doing. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm going to assume that you're against what's happening with ICE. Okay. And so you're focused again on the violence, and you're like, I need you guys to call this out before I'll vote for you. I'm like, again, I'm sorry, is he not fascist? Okay.
Before you answer that question, let me just make my point. What do you think is a more productive use of your time? Being angry. Let's just take what you're saying at face value and say it's right. Is it really a productive use of our time to just be angry and express anger about this misalignment? Or do you want to just practically address the problem? Like, is it better to be right, or is it better to be effective? Do you want to persuade people to your point of view, or do you want to harp on the fact that people don't care enough about this particular thing? Even if you're right, it's just kind of a waste of time.
Is that to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that I'm sorry. I need you to repeat it one more time because I was still trying to figure out if you were talking to me.
I'm saying, is it a better use of your time to focus on being mad that people don't share your same priorities?
Effective.
Right.
No, I think that the ineffectiveness of it is the fact that we are not focusing on the key issue. I think that makes us ineffective.
But we can't.
Our thought leaders, if you or the next person higher, or Cuomo on his thing, or Morgan on his thing, or the top people on CNN, at the New York Times, whatever, in Congress, in the Senate, in the House, in the governors, if all those people were only focused on Trump, we'd be fine. The problem is
then how do you get there? If you want to
fuck up about the riots until they start popping people in the head, man, let them burn a few cars, and I don't give a fuck. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying don't let the police handle it. Let the governor handle it. Let him say don't do this shit, but don't make the message anything more than violence.
Wait, hold on.
No.
Didn't you just say? Wait, hold on. Didn't you just say that the governor shouldn't be talking about this kind of stuff and disavowing?
No, I said he should sandwich it in there and should just be if you are doing violence, you will be blah 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 blah. But that's it. Fucking done.
Well, I think you should maybe. So again, I brought up this example before, but in the cities after MLK Jr. was assassinated, the cities where governors and mayors actually went to go meet with like the impoverished Black communities that they assumed were going to begin rioting, had very, very few instances of violence, and the protest was limited because they talked to their people and they said, what can we do? This is what we'll do. We will help. And this was at the urging of President Johnson. Cities that didn't do that saw a lot of violence. So again, honestly, I think Gavin Newsom could do something really cool as if instead of worrying about, well, I mean, to be fair, he's also dealing with like all the military insanity, but just talking to people, meeting with the protesters. I just think that would be extremely productive and demonstrate that they're listening and they're trying to help. They want to do something.
can I also just chime in real quick and follow up on just briefly with that, or try to be brief? I'll try to be brief. I won't promise.
Also, I have to pee so bad. I'll be back.
Yeah. So it was brought up earlier that like
you don't need permission. Go ahead.
Okay.
I was just telling you. I was informing you. I wasn't asking for permission.
I don't know if we needed to know that, Charlie. It was brought up earlier about the Rodney King situation, and part of what precipitated that was a failure by the institutions. The courts acquitted 3 of the officers involved, and at that point, even the president at the time was like, I don't know how you can reach this conclusion. This seems weird and bad, and might not end up approving of the end result of said riots that resulted. And you may say, oh, I'm sympathetic. However, and I tried to make this point earlier with data and actual evidence, the perception of nonviolence, at some point nonviolence, and this is the bigger question for me, at some point nonviolence fails, and at some point nonviolence doesn't work for certain communities, and nothing changes in their perception, and so violence ensues, right, wrong, or indifferent. And for me, it's like, I guess this is my point I'm going to circle back to, is the evidence suggests that since 1946, effectiveness of nonviolent protests hinges almost exclusively on you being in an ethnic majority. It just does. And it is very... What I want to say is, it's very difficult for me, going back to the whole disavow thing. I can't in good conscience disavow the LA riots.
So I just want to kind of hit on.
I've lost because we've had like 4 different people chiming in, so I'm lost the thread entirely.
No, I understand. It's a little bit of a, well, when we open it up, it's a little more free flowing. I understand. But to your data point, you keep bringing up that that peaceful protests are more effective for ethnic majorities than they are for ethnic minorities. I agree. However, that does not suggest that ethnic minorities' violent protests are more effective than ethnic minorities' peaceful.
Oh, I never said that. I never said that either.
Well, I understand that, but I feel like the implication, right, is there when you keep bringing up that statistic.
So can I clarify what my point is?
The question becomes, if I may finish, and I'll let you go. The question becomes like, okay, then what? Right? Like, okay, you're saying that ethnic minority peaceful protests aren't as effective as ethnic majority peaceful protests. Okay, so then what? Right? Okay, what does that? What is your advocacy?
So that's a fair point, and I can see why that implication is there. So I apologize if I wasn't clear. So my point in bringing that up is more as a confounding important variable in this discussion, because I do think, cards on the table, my entire kind of disposition on protest and the effectiveness of activism has been colored by a decade plus of being engaged and reading and thinking alongside a lot of Black activists, Black scholars, and people who are a lot more pessimistic about the state of America. Whether you like that or not is a separate question, but my point in bringing that up was not to say that it is more the implicit. My point was not that the implication is the more valuable thing. My point is, it is important to note that the effectiveness of nonviolence has limits, and nonviolence does not necessarily lead to the outcomes you want. I may agree that
you have a better chance. This is just empirically established. You have a better chance if your movement is nonviolent. I'd have to look into the literature that you're looking to about like ethnic minorities or whatever. But
I can send you that happily.
Please do.
That was my only point. Yeah, like my only point was that the effectiveness, you might have a higher chance, but that effectiveness moderates when you add in an important variable. That was my only point. I was not trying to.
You're not touching on Talia's point, which is that like very oftentimes when these acts of violence happen, and then there's this like extreme police reaction. Well, now you have not made your community safer. You have not benefited the movement whatsoever. You have not actually accomplished anything.
Did we not say earlier that I forget who made the point? It was Stack Sims or Hutch or Wick that my goodness, was it the is it Bloody Sunday? I think it was. It was the horrific images of seeing the nonviolent, Selma marches, the nonviolent protests.
I think I brought that up. Yeah.
like beaten with like whips. And I think they were showing a film on like Nazi Germany, and that was interrupted, like around the country, and that was interrupted to show images from the Selma marches, and that was incredibly effective. So in that sense,
because they were nonviolent.
well, but also the sheer extreme reaction of
No. Wait.
Nonviolent.
Hold on. It was specifically.
Let her finish her point. I'm
but
really curious what her point is. Go ahead.
But she's just wrong. You're
even okay. Let's say a child had thrown a water bottle at a cop during the Selma marches, and then that cop beat a young black child with a whip wrapped in barbed wire, which is what they were doing. Do you think that would change the
You're talking about a particular instance.
Matters of degree.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, sorry, I thought it was. I'll answer because I think it was directed towards me because I brought up Blood Sunday. There is obviously a matter of degree of a young kid throwing a water bottle at a cop, and what MLK took from a lot of those protesters, which were guns and bats to the protests. And if the police officers came with those chains and someone came back with a bat and it was recorded, it would be like, look at this moment of craziness. And they would show these black men holding these baseball bats against police officers. And I think that the national outcry would fail to occur. That's what I believe.
No, that's totally fair. But again, I thought we were making comparisons like with the, what's going on in Los Angeles right now. So I wasn't thinking guns and bats. I was thinking the degree of violence that we're seeing, which is largely property damage.
Well, let me ask you this, Charlie. Do you think it would be more or less?
People don't like property damage.
Well, hold on, Tali, please. Right? They don't, right? But
Tali, I gotta be honest here, Tali, and I'm not saying this because I dislike you, but you are a Trump voter. So I do feel like having this conversation with you is going to be significantly
more. That's fine.
More
and if the Democrats want to win, they're going to need to pull back the people who voted Democrat their entire life and then turned against the Democrats in the last election.
There's a difference between voting against the Democrats and then voting for Trump. So it's like, again,
you're right. And if you wanna throw everybody out of the conversation who voted in a way that you don't like, you're going to have a smaller and smaller and smaller echo chamber to converse in. I am a liberal. I am a winnable voter. That should matter.
Unfortunately, the reality of the situation is I really do want to win you over, but I also think you're an idiot who voted for Trump. So like I have to
hear you. And
time.
Don't you think that could be a whole interesting conversation? Like that's another conversation. Yeah.
But it's also not really the conversation.
I have to appeal to morons, and it is.
Hold on, I did want to ask my question, and I feel like we're getting derailed a little bit. So just a moment, please. Right. So the LA protests happen, and there are no car burnings, and there are no violence or property damage. And you see Trump calling the Marines, Trump calling the National Guard. Do you think that the people in general across the nation would support what Trump is doing more or less?
Across the nation?
Yeah, across the nation.
I think that it's also, and we've talked about the political comic of MLK's, oh, this is my nonviolent protest, and then he's standing in an extremely fucked up street.
Yeah,
I do really think that there are very much people, a good chunk of the country, many Trump voters, who will look at any sort of political demonstration done by the left, very, very especially if there are people who are not white there, and to say, this is violent and evil and scary and hateful and it's all violent. So again, but I do think that I would like to believe that the average moderate has the brain power to say, okay, burning cars, I don't like that, but sending in the military is insane for that. I would like to believe that the average person is intelligent enough.
Do you think that group of people, right, that group of people would be larger if there were no property damage, property violence, whatever you want to call it, right, and no violence at all? Would
larger in any meaningful way?
Be larger?
Not in any meaningful way, because again, I think that people who don't do, I feel like, again, the people who would see that and not are probably also people who are having like conservative news feeds fed to them, and so we'll see it as violent anyway.
We have an answer to your question. It's very simple to the fact that, like, yes, the No Kings things were being organized, but everybody saw what went down in LA on national television prior to the No Kings protests, and every moderate, average Joe showed up, and we had one of the largest single-day protests in U.S. history. I don't think people gave a shit that a few Waymos got burned. I don't think they care.
I agree with you, but I also want to really emphasize that the type of violence that you guys sometimes are endorsing or encouraging could lead to a lot of those moderates dropping off. And that is what I'm worried about.
Well, it's an issue of scale too. So like you say nobody gave a fuck because there's 5 burning cars. I mean, I do think like some like normies probably saw that, and like Staxiums, you talked about a family member who assumed LA was just crazy right now. Yeah, I mean, I think those images do matter. But, you know, you're saying it's not a big deal just because it was 5. Okay, what if it was 100? What if it was 200? And so if you reckon
that'd be a lot of burnt cars.
Okay, so if you agree that at scale it would be a bad thing, then you should necessarily agree that it's just never a good idea to do it. Because otherwise you're essentially saying you can do a little bit of violence, just not too much. But that doesn't seem.
That's the continuum fallacy. I agree with you, but that's terrible logic. I think that I would feed my kid Sprite, but I wouldn't give him heroin. That's not contradictory.
Okay, but I just want to drill it down. Are you saying a little bit of violence is okay, but not too much?
A little whiskey on the list. If you have to sleep, but you don't want to give him a whole tumbler, you know?
No, but so that begs the question, right? Like, so are you saying like a little bit of violence, but not too much? Like, and if that's what you're saying, how do you contain that? Like, how do you hope to contain the violence to just be like really small?
Because it's very hard to contain large groups of people.
That's my point, though. That's my point. If you start condoning a little violence over here, you have no way of controlling that. And violence has a tendency
because it didn't get out of hand. It's not out of hand in Los Angeles.
But that's not the point.
But once it's out of hand, will you condemn it?
I mean, yeah, if they're doing what they did in 1992 and pulling civilians from cars and beating them to death, yes, of course. If like some really maniacal shit starts happening, yes, I'll be like, oh, that's insane. Why are you doing that? Yeah, obviously, if innocents are getting hurt, I will condemn it because I never want innocents.
Wait, what about local businesses, by the way? What about a local business? Let's say a local business who maybe they make $80,000 a year at their local business and they get their shit smashed up.
I would condemn that. Absolutely.
You would condemn businesses being like windows breaking or it being set on
local
fire?
Businesses, yeah, I would condemn that.
That happened. That happened in LA.
Yes, it did.
What about a franchise business? What about a franchise business?
There was something like 21 businesses that were vandalized.
Would they have insurance that allows them to essentially replace everything?
This is so wrong. This is so wrong. Think about all the people who are going to be put out of work while they have to rebuild the place up from the ground up. Think about all the people in the community who aren't able to go there to get their lunch.
They get unemployment, and that's fine.
Wait, what? Come on.
Yes, they get unemployment and they sit at home depressed because they're not working and taking care of themselves and their family. I mean, it's really like
who's depressed when they don't have to go to work?
First of all. Wait. Hold on.
As someone that worked for a locally owned franchise, I worked for Sonic from 2018 to 2020. If someone had burned down the Sonic, I would have been like, yes.
Okay. What about the fucking owners? What about the owners? God damn it, Charlie. What about the owners?
Well, they were violating my rights, actually. They were making me work in dangerous conditions.
Wait. Okay, so why do you care about local businesses being overrun then? Why do you care about that?
Well, because
aren't they violating the rights of the workers?
I think she was talking
Probably not. I'm talking about Sonic, man. I'm talking about Sonic.
I think I don't know how much she's being serious right now because
what the hell are you talking about?
I think everyone else on the panel is referring to like small mom and pop businesses and the insurance money.
Someone brought up
process for that.
No, but there are also no.
Hold on.
Oh, hey, stop, all of you. I will mute you if you don't. Okay. Stop, all of you. You're all trying to yell at once, and we can't yell at once because no one can hear. And I love the energy, and we're there now. But give it a sec. Lycan wanted to get something in. Staxiums, Hutch. That's the order. Go ahead.
All right, grab your pen and paper because I'm going to get everything out right now. So as far as that, like the small business being destroyed, I've never been okay with that. Again, I would say still we don't need until they start torching building to building to building to building. We don't need to waste our time doing any kind of serious messaging about that. Again, fine with the governor coming out saying don't do violence, but sandwiched in between fuck Trump, right? As far as everything else though, God damn, we all fucking talk too much, and I have lost some things. All right. There was a point that Hutch brought up. Hutch, what did you talk about recently?
Like a scale of violence. Like if you're talking about like, oh,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, you helped me get the thread back. Cool. So to quote my good friend Mitt Romney, okay, there's a certain percentage of Americans that we just cannot worry about, right? And those are the diehard MAGA Republicans. Now, a poll came out recently, like the last couple months, and it basically said like an exorbitant amount of Democrats see Trump as a fascist. Only 17% of Republicans see Trump as a fascist, but hey, I'll take 17% from the right? As this shit continues to go on, if we have cohesive messaging and at the top of the message, at the top of everyone's Twitter feed, on top of their fucking, I don't know what Facebook is like these days, but at the top of Twitter, at the top of the New York Times op-ed section, on CNN every night, it is Trump is doing fascistic shit. Like, our message is fine, and we will get whoever we need to can win this election, whether it is 2026, whether it's 2028, as long as we stay cohesive in our messaging. But we start eating each other alive. Because look at this panel, the way it's going. Everyone here, except for one person, is really certain we do not want Trump, right? So go into 2026, 2028 saying Trump, and stop eating ourselves alive. We're going to be okay, because we're heading, Hutch, you brought up that, people are getting in these special elections. They're getting bodied. They're getting bodied because they're seeing what Trump is doing. But it's moments like this, and we saw it in 2020. It's moments like this where we start eating each other alive and blowing out the number of fucking people that are actually doing the violence, actually doing crazy shit. And again, when we say violence evokes a certain word. The violence of ICE and Trump is way worse than the violence of anything that anyone is doing on the ground in Los Angeles. Burning a few cars, throwing a few rocks at some ice trucks, whatever. Again, I'm not condoning it. All I'm here to do is say that is not as important in any way, shape, or form as the other shit. And if we continue to do the path we're on right now, as these protests start to grow and spread, and as Trump's side will escalate violence, as local municipalities will start to escalate violence, if you continue to focus only on the violence, we will lose the message and we will lose 2026.
So rather than like spending a lot of time condemning violence, would you be opposed to like defining your movement as one of nonviolence? So like instead of condemning what's wrong, just affirm what you think is right.
I'm fucking totally down for like people organizing protests, for them to take the time and effort to put like people in charge of different sections around the city and say, hey, like stop this. Don't let these people come in. Make sure you block them off. Yes, you're blocking off the Trumpers or whatever, and you're going to create a unified front and hold your signs. But when you see agitators, you call them out. I am totally fine with the organizers of these protests doing that. I just don't want it at the fucking top of every goddamn headline. I don't want it at the top of everyone's social media feeds. Those are where everyone else that isn't really super as involved as we are and super focused, that's where they're getting their news from.
But the headlines today, like all over the country, the headlines today were all about peaceful protests. There were little tiny disparate pockets of violence, but it did not get out of hand. And that is what defined yesterday.
We had a busy weekend.
That was
a lot of shit.
That was a very intentional thing that happened. I would say that we need to continue to do that. Continue to like just constantly reaffirm to people this is a non-violent movement.
One of the reasons that I think, and I'm going to let Saxiums go in a second, right after this, but one of the reasons I think it's important for the left to for leftists and for the left to condemn violence is to let other leftists know, don't do that shit. Right, that's not okay. So we keep the focus on the peacefulness and we don't let it get out of hand, because that's my goal, is not to let it get out of hand. We don't need bad press, right? We don't need 100 cars on fucking fire.
You're creating half the bad press, Wick. That's the problem. Hold on. What you're doing, why are you criticizing me, criticizing you, right? Shouldn't you be focusing on Trump? See, how this argumentation works? Yes, that's the point.
How come you're focused on me, but you're not focused on Trump right now?
Because you're talking about doing the shit that I'm talking about
right now.
That's what I'm focused on you.
Is you're going there and you're creating this illusion that we're having this leftist on leftist clash, but you're not focusing on what's really important, which is Trump. That's the kind of argument. But obviously that's bullshit.
No, I'm saying you're not creating an illusion. You are creating the left on left clash.
Because
so that's why I'm focusing on
you're participating in it by criticizing Wick. You're participating by
Because
criticizing.
someone has to fucking be the person, like, because again, I'm at this level. I don't have the big
that's
platform.
the
If I had
original
the big
point.
platform, I would go out there and say, stop talking about
I
the
don't have a
violence.
big
Trump's a
platform,
fascist.
brother. I got like what, a few thousand followers on
Yes,
Twitter,
but on
and
this
I got, like,
platform, in the
100 people
context of this
watching me?
conversation, you just said, yeah, but
Cool.
I need people
That's
to go out and do
something,
that.
isn't it?
And I'm saying you're creating the 50-50 divide on the left. You're creating the half that are talking about it and the
I
half that
do
aren't.
think that we will have, if we want a chance to beat Trump in 2026 and 2028, the best way to do that, the most effective way to do that, is to keep our violence out of our movement, just entirely.
Okay.
That's the most effective way, in my opinion. Go ahead.
I like that Saxiums and I are the only ones raising our hands.
I know, you are all
I
old
will.
school. You are.
I had to
you both
learn
get
the
hit
arena.
back. You both
I had
get
to
hit
learn because I
back.
keep talking over him, and then he keeps getting mad, and I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
I do.
he's
You
right.
talk a lot, Saxians, but go ahead,
Okay.
Saxians, please.
No, this is kind of look. I'm probably bringing it back maybe too far to what Charlie was saying about, like, let's not overrun mom and pop stores, but let's detonate Waymos. It feels like there's this small business fetishism that I fucking hate in American politics constantly, where if it's a mom and pop store, then it's not okay to target. Well, I don't know. Is it a tech store, or do they sell fabrics? Or I don't know. Do I recognize the name of the store or not? Because if it's a franchise owner, then it's okay to target, even if that owner still lives in the community. It's completely nonsensical. And I don't understand the distinctions that we arbitrarily make about targeting mom and pop stores as opposed to a fucking Walmart. They're still owned by the residents of the community, and they still are, the employees are almost 100% residents of the community, and it harms the local community. And it's a weird distinction, and I don't understand why we make it.
I think it's about the degree of damage that each would take on. You know, even a franchise-owned local franchise owner is going to have a lot more assistance, wealth, and material to build back anything that they lose, whereas a mom and pop shop might not. So
That
again,
is-
I view it on
That is
Go
so
ahead.
distinctly might not be true. That's such a generalization based off of no evidence. Very often
Well,
you
I
actually have
do
to
know
pay. Wait,
a-
hold on. Very often you have to pay the franchise rather than owning it yourself. So you're actually more of a victim, and you have less money sometimes. It's such a case by case basis, and the fact that you're making a generalization like this on what specifically you can target when it comes to political violence is so weird, and it doesn't make it a lick of sense.
All right. I apologize. The only franchise owners I knew were multimillionaires that would, on purpose,
I know mom and pop stores.
hire undocumented people that they would underpay. So
And I have a family member who's in charge of a mom and pop store who hires undocumented immigrants and is a multimillionaire as well. That's a
They pay them?
completely not well.
Well.
No, I just no, they don't.
This is your family.
Did I sound like I was justifying? No, family member.
Oh.
I said family member. I don't have to agree with my family members to
No,
be,
that's
for them
fine.
to be family. Okay, but
No,
I'm
no,
just saying
it's
you're
okay.
making
Yeah.
weird distinctions that make absolutely no sense, and it feels extremely strange to say, "Oh, here's what I can target in the community, and here's what I can't." Maybe let's stop targeting things in a community.
Can I just chime in?
I still think I'm not going to weep for a Walmart. I will not weep for a Walmart.
But
I
not.
will
But
shed
what about his
tears.
employees
I
who
will
lost their job?
mourn the Walmart as it burns. I
Again,
will sit
as
there
someone-
and I will
someone-
shed tears.
Someone that worked at a Sonic that was a locally owned franchise, if they had burned down the Sonic, and maybe this is case
Why
by
did you
case,
quit then? Why did
case-
you quit? Why would you
By
prefer
case
the
by
Sonic job
case.
to no job? Don't you prefer the Sonic job to no job?
Family.
I've
You
worked
were
at-
taking
I've worked-
care of a family on your Sonic job for 2 years. It's ridiculous. You sound privileged out of your mind.
Tally, wait, sorry. I have a question for Charlie.
I'll let Charlie
why
respond
didn't
to
you
that.
quit?
Hold on.
I have been supporting myself for quite some time. Thank you very much. If they had burned down anywhere I'd ever worked, as long as I got unemployment, I wouldn't give a fuck because I have
If you
hated
quit, you still
everywhere
get
that I worked.
unemployment. But if you
No,
quit,
if
you
you
still get
quit-
unemployment. So why don't you quit?
No, you have to be fired to get
You have to get
unemployment.
fired to get
Depends on the state.
unemployment.
Yeah, you have to get
Is that
fired.
true?
to
I've
get
never
unemployment.
I've never been unemployed. Sorry. Okay, that's my privilege.
Okay.
to ask, I
California
guess.
is liberal enough
Yeah.
that you get it just to quit, but
No, you
everywhere
don't.
else is.
Maybe it's a state by state basis. Okay.
All right, but listen,
You
I
don't
wouldn't have.
make your full wage on unemployment, and unemployment
Yeah, it's
doesn't last
miserable being on
forever.
unemployment.
Yeah, I've
It's
been on
ridiculous. It's a
unemployment. Hold on,
ridiculous
as someone
thing to
I can
say.
actually speak to this
Oh,
because
I
I was on
managed,
unemployment
so
for quite a while.
apologies. I managed.
Yeah, I was on unemployment for a while in Florida. during right after the market crash in 2008, right? I was let go, right? And I was on unemployment for a while. That shit sucks. It sucks going through the hoops that you need to go through, right? It's not just you don't go in there, it says unemployment, please, and then it's automatic. You got to sign up for it. You got to go in every so often. And
the Republicans make you think it's
right?
super easy.
Can we recognize? Can we recognize the mental gymnastics?
Hold on, let me finish my story. And I got like a fraction of my pay, right? Like I think I was making at the time like $2,000 a month or something. I got like $400 a month. It was crazy bad.
Can we recognize?
That's crazy. I was getting like $2,000 a month when I was on unemployment.
And I was in Florida, so maybe.
And I was working as a host at Tahoe Joe's.
Can we recognize the amount of mental gymnastics that has to occur for a leftist to suddenly stop having sympathy for someone who lost their job? Like that is crazy. The mental gymnastics that we're going through here.
Can I finally?
Again, my experience is that like when things were like when during
so who
COVID,
cares if someone lost their job?
Down.
Who cares if unemployment reaches 10%, right?
Okay,
I mean, like, yeah, that's not ideal, but again,
why is it not ideal? You just said that it was fine.
They can rebuild, and you can get a new job.
Okay,
didn't you guys just scream at me like, "Why didn't I go get a new job?" Like, what the fuck?
How do you not have sympathy for people who have lost their jobs?
Okay.
I mean, who in Los Angeles has lost their jobs?
No, stop. You're not engaging with the question. I'm saying if you destroy property damage, it's very possible that the employees will suddenly be jobless for at least a few months until they rebuild, or possibly never get it again. And you're saying, who the f cares? And I'm saying, what kind of fucking world do we live in where we stop caring about people losing their jobs? There are a ton of situations. Elon Musk cut 500,000 federal employees. Do you like, oh, well, I guess they can just go on unemployment. I guess it doesn't matter, right?
I mean, that's a very different situation than minimum wage employees that work for Walmart. Like, if they firebombed the Walmart. Like, again, I feel like this is a different scenario. That was a dude from South Africa. It's a dude from South Africa coming in and fucking our government up. I don't think any of us are pro Doge here.
Okay.
Just relax. You're getting red in the face. You're getting red in the face.
All right. It's my face.
Breathe.
Hold on, Rudy. Okay. Rudy needs to go soon, so I want to give Rudy a mic and let him have final words, etc. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So I appreciate this discussion, and Stack, Sims, and Hutch, thanks for being amicable discussants and chat with. This was fun, and I actually felt like I learned something about y'all's like kind of angle. But I do want to just leave with this kind of observation, something Wick said a bit ago about how leftists should tell other leftists you need to behave and stop violence. And I'm going to just be this is probably as direct as I will get in terms of antagonism towards anyone, but there are these discussions happening among leftist spaces. There is a century plus of discussions about violence and nonviolence among anarchists in particular. That's my milieu and circle. I find it very hard to be in these discussions where I'm told I have to tell my compatriots don't behave this way when those conversations are ongoing. There are discussions among anarchists about property damage. What is the appropriate target? It's a question of tactics and targeting. However, it is exhausting to talk when we, on the anarchist left, when we do act, a lot of the cool stuff, for example, we all love the internet. We are all too goddamn chronically online. If you're a streamer, I'm sorry, you're chronically online. Everything cool on the internet to keep the internet free, or large portions of it, are done by anarchists. That is productive. So I love talking to y'all, and I actually think this is important to have these conversations with liberals and have these discussions, but it is really hard that we're at this point where some of it is my side's fault. Y'all are also responsible for your behavior towards the left and how you are antagonistic, because it's hard to have productive ground when we're being told you guys are too violent, tut, 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 instead of, and again, this is where Hutch and I actually might agree, and I think we all kind of agree, but Hutch said this earlier, I would actually have I would love to talk with Hutch about tactics, like productive tactics and ideas and strategies down the line. But I would also encourage you all, and I'm happy to send a reading list to the group chat, but I would encourage you all to read a lot more like anarchist histories and theories of nonviolence, because it's a century plus of a debate. And I think it would do you guys well, because there are some gaps here in terms of knowing some of that landscape. And I think I could do well, and also to read more on kind of
beat up on more recent liberal stuff. So I also need to do some more work.
Never a bad thing to read, but I will say this, and I like you, Rudy, and I think you're a cool guy. But I will say this as you go, I will never apologize for tut-tutting violent anarchists. I will never apologize.
No.
That is good and morally right. It is always morally justified to do. People who grape people, I will always morally condemn grape. Right? It's never okay, right? And I will not apologize for doing so, even though there's maybe hundreds of years of literature on that. Graping is always bad.
Okay, well, that's a false equivalence. I don't think there's any justifiable reason. Anyway,
my only point, Wick, and this will be the last thing, is like I don't want you to not tut-tut. That's your position. I respect it, and I'm very grateful that you all have been very respectful of my position and my attempt to not TOS you guys. However, that's my encouragement, is that I think more dialogue could happen if there weren't so many little gaps. And I do find it frustrating because there are so many free resources about nonviolence. I literally read a whole debate on the Anarchist Library today from like 2 years ago about anarchists and nonviolence. Like, this is an active debate, but we don't have this debate with you guys because it's really hard to have a conversation when the other tactics that you don't like us doing are the only thing you fixate on. So that's what I'm saying. It's just harder to have that conversation when there's not some level of like mutual respect. I respect you all, to be clear. I'm saying you as the
I think we've had a pretty decent conversation, but thank you for
I appreciate you all.
We won't keep you guys too much more longer. We are kind of winding down on this. I'm not Hamas. I'm not going to keep you all hostage, right?
Nice.
Yeah, I do want to give people kind of like last words. And is there anything we haven't covered that you guys feel that we should cover? And we can kind of go around the room with that. Let's start. I did want
to. We all are against the LAPD using excessive force, correct? Like, we don't like the whole like shooting the rubber.
Bad, yes.
The rubber bullets.
You're kind of begging the question here by calling it excessive force. Excessive force by definition is bad, right?
Okay. We don't like it when largely peaceful protesters who are not physically assaulting anyone are shot with less lethal rounds and tear gas. Like, we're generally against that, or can we? Okay.
No, I condemn police violence and police force when it was not necessary. If it's not necessary and they're engaged in it, then I don't think it's okay, and I think they should be condemned. And I think we should largely, right? We should largely hold people who do it accountable. So the police officers who engage in that kind of behavior should be held accountable. But this also plays in. If I'm finished, I'll let you go. But that also that informs my take on protester violence. Protester violence that is not necessary should be condemned, and we should hold those people who do it accountable.
Okay.
The same, right?
When does what do you think is the line when is police violence necessary or good?
When there is imminent threat to life or property. So, for example, if my car was outside and I saw a bunch of hood rats, if a bunch of Rudies came up, and there's like 3 Rudies, he cloned himself, right? And they try to firebomb my car, I want the police to shoot a rubber bullet at them and make them stop. My car, if I lose my car, I can't get to, well, I stream at home, right? But like, there's been plenty of times in my life where I lost my car and I can't get to work. I'm screwed, right? I want the police to use force to protect my car, for example, right? So that's my line. If there's imminent threat to life or property.
Is Rudy a dog whistle?
No, that's his name. That was the guy's name that we just talked to. He was just here.
Who has a PhD, by the way.
He was just here. Like,
Charlie, let me ask you, like, let's say you have a peaceful assembly and everything's fine. There's a line of cops, and then a more violent element comes in and they start chucking things at police officers. Do you think the police have the, do you think that they have the justification to use force to disperse that crowd?
What kind of force are we talking? Not rubber bullets, certainly. I think that's crazy. I would say,
for example, what they use, and a lot of times is they'll throw in tear gas, and then if there are people that are still lingering, there'll be more violent confrontations.
I think that tear gas is crazy.
What would you suggest?
Yeah, what would you use?
I do believe that there was in Oregon. I would like to say I only lived in Portland for about 2 years, and I hated it. I hate Portland.
Everyone does, but go ahead.
But yeah. They did kind of defund the police, and I don't think that that was a successful operation because what they did is they defunded the police and then presented no good solutions for helping people who were homeless or addicted to drugs. So that sucked. But what they did do was they did have a specific like social workers that were trained specifically to de-escalate.
No, but we're not talking about that though. Hold on.
Hold on, I'm making a comparison. Can you please let me finish?
No, but these are two totally different. I'm not talking about any of that right now.
Finish your comparison, and then you can tell why it's disanalogous.
Okay.
I'm saying is that improved de-escalation tactics, which we have not really seen from the LAPD, what I see is escalation. That is what I have witnessed thus far during the LA ICE protests. Is I have not seen. But I participated in protests
which is very different.
which oh my god, I'm sorry. It's hard to.
I just want to be so just to be clear.
I would really prefer to have this conversation with people who are like leftist only, because then I have to like start jumping through.
Well, here, just talk to here. Wait.
The right wing hoops shit, and it's
okay.
I'm a completely reasonable interlocutor. You're being ridiculous.
Okay. I'm right here though. I'm right.
Trump. I cannot define you as a completely reasonable.
I voted for Kamala Harris.
Participant.
I voted for Kamala Harris. So here, just
yeah.
So what you're so just to be clear, what you're saying is if there's a protest. And then there are certain people in the crowd of protesters who themselves escalate with violence. You're saying that you would like to see the police send in social workers?
Send in the social workers.
No, not social workers. But again, what I'm saying is that there were social workers who were trained to de-escalate situations with mentally unwell individuals who were potentially violent.
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. That has nothing.
I am saying, what I am saying.
This has nothing to do with what I'm talking about.
De-escalation with potentially violent civilians. Yes, I think that you can do that without harming civilians.
You are deflecting to something that is totally irrelevant.
Punishment, which is tossing like fucking tear gas or shooting rubber bullets into a crowd in which some participants.
Okay, so let me just I asked you a question though.
For the whole group.
But I asked you what would you do? What would you? So you seem to agree that the police technically, like, maybe they'd be justified in dispersing a crowd if it started to get violent. So like, what would you do? You don't like tear gas, so like, what would you do?
What would I do? Well, it depends. I would have to disagree with the escalation on the part of the crowd. But if I did disagree with it,
sorry, I'm throwing myself in because this is really important. Okay. I am kind of, if you squint at it, a social worker trained in de-escalation. I work at a residential treatment center. This actually right here, this little thing right here, this is from a 15-year-old girl who was trying to self-harm. I tried to put her in a hold to refuse her to do it, and she clawed at me. Okay. Now, it's not that big of a deal. Okay. It's not that dangerous, but that was a 15-year-old girl who weighed a fourth my size, was able to do something like that. And we've gotten concussions, we've gotten broken ribs. We live in we work at a pretty contained facility where they don't have access to things like bricks or bottles or things like that can actually hurt people. And these are, once again, teenagers. Do you feel like social workers are well equipped to handle people who are 30 years old coming in with disruptive equipment, things like bricks and bottles and things like that? Do you think a social worker could be able to handle it? Because personally, I feel like what I would need to do in order to step into that crowd. First off, I wouldn't be able to.
I can't confirm that Zach seems in real life. He's weak, and if
true,
he would.
True. I would basically need to put on riot gear, and at that point, we're just rebuilding a cop.
So my mother is 5'2" and has at the most in her life weighed 120 pounds, and that was big. She was an ER trauma nurse for 20 to 30 years. She was very, very used to dealing with violent patients, almost all of whom were larger than her and did have access to things that they could hurt her with. She has never shied away from de-escalating a situation.
We have totally lost the thread
She's
here.
Like, again, like what I'm saying is like Staxium's being like, shut the up, Tally. I don't want to talk to you. You are a Trump voter, dude. I don't.
Toddler.
Dude, you threw the rest of us under the bus because you were pissy about like the leftists. Like, dude, I cannot engage with you. You betrayed us.
Okay, but
I can't.
Nonetheless, we've totally lost the thread here. By the way,
I don't have
Then you should log off then, because I'm in the
to
conversation.
engage with you. Well, it sucks.
You should log off then, because I'm here. I'm in the conversation.
I was invited to the panel, okay? I was asked by Wix to be on the panel. Oh, I'm just... Jesus.
Okay. I guess the point...
Hold on. This is real important. No one gets to decide on who's on my show about me, right? Everyone's allowed here. Everyone's invited here. Do not do this soy. No, you can leave if I'm here. You can leave if I'm here. Stop, please.
I guess the point that I'm making here is that I don't think you really make any space for the possibility that sometimes protesters escalate, and in those cases, what are the police supposed to do?
De-escalate in a way that doesn't hurt the crowd at large, which they don't do.
But how? Don't tell me social worker, please. I'm begging you. Just like, how would you do it? Just
walk in and arrest someone. I don't know.
That's not violent.
You don't have to start shooting.
So if you go into a crowd of
and rubber bullets into people,
so just arrest everybody, kettle everyone, and arrest them.
Let's say they pull them from the crowd, and the crowd starts ganging up on them and starts beating them up.
Yeah.
Okay. What happens then?
If they start beating up the police?
Yeah.
Yes. This is an extremely reasonable hypothetical.
I suppose that would indeed begin a great degree of violence on both sides. That would be.
Agree.
But do you think people mostly beat up cops? Is that happening?
I think that when it comes to escalation and really like concentrated groups in protests, yes, I do think that people start instigating, throwing bricks. Someone tries to pull someone away from the situation, and it looks a little violent because you're pulling someone out of a crowd, and people are like, "Hey, get that guy off!" and starts attacking that person, even though the cop was kind of acting a little.
All right, I'm raising my hand.
Yeah,
okay.
I see. Let's go, and then we're gonna read some super chats. And then we're gonna continue from there.
So
go ahead.
So now I am gonna be fully transparent, and I had a spark of inspiration to Google something, and I'm not saying I have the answer to what it ought to be, but no, hold on, sorry, I'm collecting my thoughts. The other day I was having a fight with a conservative about fucking cops, like one of those, like, you listen to cops at all times, whatever. And then I got into like traffic stops, like finding out that traffic stops actually like increase danger for cops, like the quotas. That's what it was. The quotas actually increase the danger for cops. And so I just Googled, and I'm seeing some things like an ACLU study or an ACLU Physicians for Human Rights study, and some other things like a study of the from Cambridge. Let's see, Cambridge.org, about like the Hong Kong riots back in 2019, and both of them kind of coming to the same conclusion that the use of tear gas doesn't actually disperse crowds; it incites them. So I guess I'd ask you and Hutch, and Staxiums, if you assume that is to be true, since I'm not showing you what I'm looking at and all that other shit, like, where do we go from there?
I don't know what you're looking at there.
Gas doesn't actually de-escalate and disperse.
That link anywhere, and then we can put it in the...
If tear gas doesn't de-escalate and disperse, do they have any sort of methods that would be able to de-escalate and disperse a crowd?
Because when Hutch asked this question, and I don't know if I just misheard, but when he first asked it, I don't think he said violent crowds, just
yes, I did.
To disperse a crowd, or were you just saying?
No, yes, I did.
I'm saying that a tear gas wouldn't disperse a crowd. That feels very crazy to me. But if you're saying it doesn't, and I'll engage with the hypothetical, then, and you're saying there's other methods that would disperse the crowd, then use those methods. I don't understand the question.
Well, my question is, like, so you're going to have violent crowds, like, that are maybe torching something or whatever. But you're going to have you have these situations where they're not violent. And I don't think I need to go hunt for this, right? I think we're all media savvy enough that we've been watching the 2020 riots and then the shit that happened now, that we've seen cans of fucking tear gas launched into crowds that weren't doing jack shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, do I need to go qualify
It
that?
happens. It happens. Yes.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where I'm like, even when they are being violent, though, what I'm seeing here, and I'm gathering the links, is that it tends to have a more inciting effect instead of actually dispersing the people. So it's like we see the cops do it and escalate the situation, and then it gets blamed on the fucking people, and then we see them use it as a way to deter. I don't know, are there studies on how many of these situations needed to be deterred? I don't know. This is an area of all this stuff I've not thought through.
I did in my chat really quick from someone said in Hong Kong they spray rioters and looters with blue paint so they can be easily identified and arrested. So that to me seems like a non-violent solution.
How do you arrest someone and pull them away from the crowd without it appearing non-violent? That's the question.
Okay.
Well, they would be marked for later. You would be able to find them.
Yeah.
You just find people with blue paint?
Yeah.
What if they don't disperse though? So now you can find them later, but what if they just stand there?
What if it gets on them in an accident? Like, there's 1,000 things that can go wrong. And here's the thing. This is a really simple conversation. I don't know why we're having it. Not that it's simple. It's an easy conversation to have. Whatever works, we use it. And whatever doesn't work, we throw away. Okay. And if you're saying tear gas doesn't work, if you're saying blue paint works, then let's do that. I disagree with the efficacy of those. I might disagree with the efficacy, but we're not really here to talk about that. We're here to talk about whether or not cops can use effective manners. And if we agree that there are some effective manners that they can use, then they should use those.
If they can, and they can do it
tear
without
gas and
escalating
rubber
violence.
bullets, like,
Hold on.
like effective?
Hold on. I want to give it to Hutch for a minute. He's trying to get in.
Come on.
He's been so polite. Hutch gets the head pats for now.
Well,
Hutch, go ahead. Here's
I think when events like these happen where you have widespread protests, you certainly see a lot of examples, especially there's like 330 million people. Everybody has a cell phone. Like day one, you're going to see maybe dozens of examples of cops that use violence that appears excessive, or maybe just objectively is excessive. And I'm right there with you when it comes to condemning overreach and condemning excessive use of force. You lose me a little bit when you don't seem to make space for the possibility that sometimes protesters escalate too. Like we can see, we can observe it happening. I watched some of it happen yesterday. And when that happens, and I guess that goes to the larger point of what we're talking about today. Like, I want to discourage that kind of behavior altogether. But like when you're in that position where you have a group of protesters that's escalating violence, you lose me when you're like, okay, the way that police should respond to that is by sending in a social worker. What they do is they give you a warning to disperse. They give you time to disperse. And then if you're still there, like, you're very clearly at that point, you're welcoming that kind of conflict with cops.
So I did not say send in, I apologize if I didn't clarify correctly. I did not say send in a social worker, but what I mean is they need to have people trained specifically, probably cops, in proper de-escalation. And I'm so glad someone mentioned the paint thing, because again, I think that's actually a pretty good idea.
But you're not,
if you know you're most likely to get arrested, you'd avoid the people who are being violent. And
you're not really meaningfully
paint on you.
You're not really meaningfully engaging with what I'm talking about.
Okay. Sometimes yes, protesters do escalate. However, does this mean that the entire crowd of protesters should be punished with tear gas, which is a chemical weapon, or rubber bullets, which can kill people or severely injure people? Should an entire crowd of people be punished because of a few agitators?
If I stay in a crowd that's been given a dispersal order, I know they're going to use tear gas. Like, I know at some point they're going to push in.
Can't they abuse the dispersal order? A few people got rowdy, so they say disperse, and now you can make 2,000.
Of course, but I'm not talking about that. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, like, for example, on Thursday, I think in Los Angeles, they gave a crowd a 10-minute warning for a dispersal order, and then they waited another 45 minutes to move in. They were throwing firecrackers at cops. They were throwing shit at cops.
All right.
Yes.
What I feel like the problem of this conversation is, I feel like me and Hutch are perfectly willing to agree that there are times when cops are unreasonable and protesters are cops are unreasonable, protesters are reasonable. and there's a clash and we disagree with that, or we disagree with the cops did. But do you guys agree that sometimes it happens the other way, where cops are being perfectly reasonable and the protesters are being psychos?
And they'll never want to.
I would say yes. I would say every time there's like a sports team loses or wins.
We're not talking about sports games, though.
The people freaking out, yes, are very much in the wrong.
First of all,
yeah, Philadelphians. Yes.
No, but these things happen during like civil rights struggles as well. These things happen during like this movement right now, this anti-ICE movement.
Yes, people who are agitators. Yes, they're people who are intentionally doing any sort of non-productive property damage or violence.
And in that case, if you're escalating, and the cops tell you to disperse and you stay there, technically that's civil disobedience, right? So if you know the risks and you're okay with the risks, hey, whatever, jam out, that's fine. If you want to get arrested and you think that'll do some good, fine. But if the cops give a dispersal order and you stand there and you know you're standing like close to people, you know, we're throwing objects at the cops or whatever, I do not feel bad for you if you get arrested and they throw tear gas. I just don't.
Okay, but what if I don't know, dude, there's a guy whose testicle fucking shattered from a rubber bullet.
We already told you that we're fine acknowledging that police officers escalate sometimes.
Okay, I have to escalate in making my money, so let me get through these super chats. I appreciate you guys, and then
fucking whore.
Yeah, I know it. True.
Yeah.
$10 from Alexander Wrin to say, at this point, I'm wondering if the majority of the left is just MAGA without Trump as a figurehead. The lack of empathy when it serves you is stunning at times. Also, #FAnarchists. Thank you for the $10. $2 from Feder Methodist to say, you have found Katie Light. No, I have not. Katie is on a whole nother level. Let's not flatten the term. $20 from Alexander Wrin. Thank you for $20. We'll talk later. Does the girl on the top left really think you can de-escalate a crowd of people on the verge of violence when they are surrounded by like-minded actors? Mob mentality is a thing. You don't reason with mobs. $20 from me. Okay, fair enough. $20 from Pondering Politics to say, Wick, this is important. Please ask Stacks to steal me on the case. We're going to ignore him, but we're going to read it out, right? It says, Wick, this is important. Please ask Stacks to steal me on the case for the rise of Skywalker's brilliance.
Jesus Christ.
Also, give my love Lycan, Hutch, and even Stacks. Well, thank you for the $20. And we'll not be doing that, but thank you.
Love you, Josiah.
Okay, $20 from Alexander Wrin to say, non-lethal and non-sedative force often makes things worse in riots. People don't back down when they feel attacked, they double down. Studies and real-world protests have proven this out. Violence begets violence. And thank you for the $20. And I think that echoes what Lycan was saying. I do want to give Polly a chance, and I know that some people don't want to talk here, but she is here. I'll give her a chance to have her say and give her thoughts. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, I was formerly a radical leftist, and I spent a lot of time protesting. Groups of people are really hard to de-escalate. Even when we're talking about like this paint thing, like, okay, maybe that marks people so that we know who to arrest later. But what is the guarantee that that disperses the crowd? We don't have any guarantee. The police typically, before they're going to use any type of force, they're getting on speakers and they're announcing a time frame of when everybody needs to disperse this area so that nobody gets hurt and nobody gets in trouble. I've been to protests where they cattle people in. I've been to protests where they turn on sprinklers. That I was saying to Wick the other day, that was the most effective way of getting us all to leave City Hall during the 2020 BLM riots, was they turned the sprinklers on us when we were all sleeping on the ground. That is non-violent, and it was very effective to get everyone to flee. I think the problem, frankly, is there are a lot of people on the left, many of them who will say it with their chest, even though others will kind of tiptoe around it, who do not believe that there is any justifiable reason for police to use any force, basically unless someone like literally has a gun to their head or something. They don't believe that police should be able to intervene at all in these types of protests. They see the police as purely evil. And, you know, this kind of brings me back for a second. I don't want to derail, but I'm not actually sure that everyone at these protests has the same goal. We had a conversation the other day with a left-wing guy, a reasonable guy, and his goal, which is sort of my goal too, is for that anybody who is being deported has due process, that no one is being shipped out of the country without having a hearing, that people aren't being polled for reasons that are against the Constitution. That is not what everyone is fighting for. Other people are fighting to abolish ICE and to stop all of the deportations of anybody who is undocumented in this country. So frankly, there is already kind of from the start a lack of unified messaging. And I get that that's hard to do and it's not possible to do, but it feels like the people who want to take the incremental approach or want to minimize harm right now by at least ensuring that there's due process in these deportations, they get drowned out by the more revolutionary forces, the people who prefer to abolish than to reform.
I want to hear the response from everyone.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I am, as you might assume, I am fully think I should be abolished, and I do not care if people are undocumented in our country. I think the documentation process should be easier, and I'm also a big fan of no borders. So this is kind of
Might be another debate, right?
That's a different. That's
a whole other
debate.
can of worms.
My end is I'm not an open border person, but I really don't give a shit, dog. It's a misdemeanor. Like, fucking cool.
Thanks.
Snap your fingers, Thanos. All these illegal immigrants. All your favorite restaurants are fucking gone. And as Hutch knows, the food industry is one of my fucking big things. The teachings of Anthony Bourdain are incredibly valuable. I suggest everyone go read his books. Watch his episode on Iran, by the way, for Parts Unknown before we go into another fucking war. But that said, completely different. These are our people. Another debate. Wick, you get me on that panel. Well, these are fucking people that the majority of them have been being better Americans than Americans themselves. I really do not care that they are undocumented. What I think that on the critical path, when you stack up again priorities, right? It's fixing our immigration system. It's not having people like Trump in fucking office who can weaponize xenophobia to the degree that he has, because all he's doing is drumming up hate. Everyone thinks these fucking people are taking jobs. Guess what? These fuckers pay more taxes than they ever take, right? People say, well, they work under the table. First of all, let's assume they all fucking worked under the table, right? No, guess what? Still fucking excise taxes, still going to be fucking local taxes. These people support the communities that they live in. They are fucking valuable. Thanos snapped them. Those communities are fucking done. Fucking, I don't know what number of points I'm on here, but billions, tens of billions every year in state and federal fucking taxes come from these people. They don't get SNAP, by the way. They are not qualified. They don't get it. They don't get Medicaid. They don't get Medicare. They get, in specific situations, they only get emergency room visits from fucking Medicaid. The end, fucking period. Now, Medi-Cal, people want to bring that up. Guess what? The fucking increased costs of Medi-Cal are not just because more people have signed up and they're illegal immigrants. It's because of increasing drug prices and a bunch of other shit. But guess what? They paid they paid fucking 8.5 billion in 2022, I think, alone. They paid 8.5 billion in state taxes alone to fucking California. That covered the cost of fucking Medi-Cal that year. But if you take all the other fucking considerations, the fact that the US government gave X number of $1 billion to the fucking government of California at one point in time, but that every fucking year they get again 30 to 60 fucking billion from these illegal immigrants, and those people, those fucking programs that are funding, they don't get every single one of those. So they're putting more tax dollars into this fucking country. So even if you're just a fucking pragmatist, you should want these fucking people here, because the United States fucking of America would take a 5% GDP hit if these people fucking disappeared, right? So they are an integral goddamn part of this fucking country. They don't get Social Security. They don't get all their fucking healthcare benefits. And yet everyone wants them fucking gone because they think they're a fucking scourge, despite the fact that their crime rate is fucking less than those of the native born Americans per capita. So suck my fucking dick. I am so goddamn tired of hearing about the fucking illegals. Jesus Christ.
Okay. I think at this point, we've kind of circled the drain. We all got our points out. We said what we wanted to say. So we're going to end the show. I'm going to give each of these individuals, lovely individuals, a chance to shout themselves out. I have a full list of the people who I invited originally in the YouTube description. You can find their links. You can click their links. You can give them a follow, give them a whatever they want, right? And thank them for their time, because again, they've taken time out of their Sunday evening on Father's Day of all times, right, to come play with us and have a discussion. And I do appreciate every single one. I know it's gotten heated, but I still love every single one of you. Okay. With that said, tomorrow I'm going to be going live to talk with someone who has a lot of issues with some of my panels, who's had issues with my transgender debate panel the other day and has issues with me just in general. We're going to be talking to Eli Monty. Should be fun. On Tuesday, me and Tali are hosting our co-host show. We're going to be talking to Tafdash and Hunter Ash about science and things like that. And that's what we got coming up. Tune on in. Okay, with that, we're going to start with Charlie, and we're going to end with Tali. Charlie, close us out.
I don't know if we reached any conclusions, but it sure was a way to spend my Sunday. Appreciate the invite, Wick. I had fun. Tali, sorry for yelling at you. I'm a bitch. Hutch, when you clip farm, don't put anything in that says I didn't vote, because I intended to. I just moved states and couldn't.
I don't lie.
Also, please don't frame me as like a dumb Igor bimbo. I don't think I'm going to post any clips.
You're good. I'm not. I would never call you a whore either. What the?
Chillin'. Appreciate that. Just in case. I don't know, man. It's happened
You can
before.
call me a whore,
Not from
Hutch.
you. Yeah. But overall, I think I had fun. I had feelings. I had emotions.
Thanks for being here. I do appreciate you. I always enjoy when you even when we fight, Charlie. I always
it's always fun.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hutch, go ahead.
The way to beat Trump in this movement is politically. You're not going to beat them with like a fist fight. You're not going to beat them in like a hot confrontation. And so again, 3.5%. That's the magic number. If you can get any nation to have 3.5% of the population engage in nonviolent protest, there's no authoritarian regime that has survived that threshold in the last 100 years. Nonviolent protests have twice as much of a chance of being successful than violent protests. So apart from the moral arguments, just from a purely practical perspective, you should want people that show up to these protests to be disciplined and focused in whatever they're doing. And you should want them to be principally nonviolent. So thank you guys for showing up, and I enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thanks for having. We were glad to have you, Hutch. Check him out, gang. He's a great guy. Next up, Lycan.
Hey, thank you for bringing me on. I haven't had one of these debate panels in a while. I've been kind of stalking your shit, waiting for the right one to jump in on. So this was fun. Hutch, always good to see you, baby. We got to do a cooking stream again.
Yeah, let's do it.
And everyone else, I think first time meeting y'all. Nice to meet you. And yeah, get out there and fucking vote, man. Did we? Sorry,
I've been at a bunch of the canvassing events.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Hung out. It's fine.
I totally believe it. I am just terrible with fucking names, faces, and my life's a blur. But anyway, fucking go vote. Tell everyone to vote. Fucking do it. And yeah, go out there and fucking protest. The next time these fucking Kings things are happening, get out your goddamn room, go touch some grass or pavement, I guess, and make your voice heard. That's all I have.
Well, thank you for being here. Glad you wanted to jump on, and always.
Oh, and don't be violent. I'm sorry. I have to be consistent and give a little bit to that. Don't be violent. All right. Sorry, Wick.
Staxiums. It's okay. Staxiums.
Hello. I guess today really was Bloody Sunday. Am I right, guys? Right? Okay. So I believe in amnesty. I believe in DACA. I believe in ousting Trump. And I believe the best way to do that is through peaceful measures. My name is Staxiums everywhere. I'm mostly on TikTok, and I post on YouTube and Twitter, and you can find me there too. I cannot believe that we're a bunch of losers that spent 3 hours on Father's Day talking about this stuff. So I'm going to go get tri-tip with my dad, and I hope you guys call your dad and tell them how much he's great. If he's great, he might not be great. Don't call him then. That's all.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers. I talked to my dad earlier. He's great, and I love my dad. And Dad, if you are listening to my show for whatever reason, after you get done and calm down from all the liberals on here, right? Just know that I love you, buddy. Okay, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Tali, please.
Thanks, Wick. My dad is way too old to be watching Wick TV or anything on YouTube, frankly. Thanks for letting me jump in this conversation, guys. I think it was interesting, even if we didn't all come to agreement. I would love to have this conversation again. I also support DACA. I also support a path towards citizenship and amnesty not necessarily for everybody, but I think that's something that we need to make available to a lot of people who are currently here undocumented. I'm just gonna throw this out there. Axia or Staxia, what is your name?
Stacks. Just call me Stacks.
Okay. I would like to take you up on that offer to talk more if you're interested. And Hutch, I would like to speak to you too. I don't know if you'd want to come on. Wick and I host a little show about once a week. If you'd want to come talk to us, I would like to talk to you and pick your brain too. So
Yeah, I'm down.
if I'm not going to hurt you guys' street cred too much, I would love to continue the conversation. So thanks, everybody.
Okay, Tali, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Talibots, TALIBOTZ, and at least once a week here on Wick TV. So,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't show myself. Can I do that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Hey, folks. I don't know if I can post a link in the chat, so I won't do it. But I write a Substack. I wrote one article, and that's really all I do. Here, I got you, Wick. I'm going to send it to you. All right. I wrote a fucking Susie Weiss, Barry Weiss's sister, wrote a really fucking stupid article about Anthony Bourdain being terrible. And so I wrote a response to that. So if you guys want to check it out, that's really all I do. I don't stream anymore, any shit like that. But I figured I'd shill the Substack.
Okay. Well, hopefully.
I also did not shill either.
Go chill. Everyone chill.
I'm enemy Charlie everywhere, but mostly on Twitch. One day, hopefully not. But for now,
join us on YouTube. Okay, YouTube's great. Okay,
I'm planning on it. I've heard that the money's better.
Look, and I can also say exactly what I feel, right? And I don't have to worry about weird, arbitrary Twitch moderation, which is dog shit.
It's dog shit.
Yeah.
It's
psychological torture. With that, I'll see you guys tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. Wait, bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.